Might as well get...
Please rise for the pledge. Call the meeting to order. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome our guests this evening. Apologize for running late. We seem to have difficulty even though we work hard at it. But again, my apologies. First item on our agenda. We have minutes of, do we want to forego the minutes and pick them up at the end?
I think so.
That would help, right? Let's do that. We'll approve legal bills at the end. Anyone here for public comment? Jeff wanted to say something about the gas, but we could do that later too. Seasonal license renewals, we can do that. We can do that later. Appointment reappointments, we'll do that later.
No,
Public hearing, so we can go back and do a few things.
Sure.
Sorry about that. I thought we were a whole half hour late. We're only 15 minutes. All right, let's proceed with the minutes then. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
That's all right. Let's get it.
We have the minutes of March 28th executive session. This morning.
Okay.
I think this is the one, Mr. Chairman, I would still like to propose some changes potentially for the board's consideration beforehand, so I would ask that you postpone.
Okay, we will put it on our agenda for next meeting.
Thank you.
We have a regular session of April 4th.
Okay,
Madam
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the April 4th, 2016 regular session minutes as written.
Second?
Second by Mr. O'Leary. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the April 14th, 2016 regular session minutes as written.
Second?
Do we have an executive session for April
Fourth.
4th? Catherine?
Yes, we did. I was going to do that motion after this.
Okay, fine. Motion is regular session of April 14th, 2016. Do we hear a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. O'Leary. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Okay, we have an executive session of April 4th and 14th. April 4th.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the April 4th, 2016 executive session minutes as written.
Second.
Second by Mr. O'Leary. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. And we now have one for the 14th, April 14th.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the April 14th, 2016 executive session minutes as written.
Second.
Second by Mr. O'Leary. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have legal bills.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve legal bills for Furman Gregory Deptula in the amount of $60,000, which includes $22,856.75 for invoice number 11308 dated April 13, 2016, and the remainder to be used for expert services.
Second.
Second by Mr. O'Leary. And I take it that that brings us up to date and adds a retainer for expert witnesses. Is that how I read that?
That's correct, yes.
Any discussion?
I just have a quick question on this.
Yes.
Michael, if you know, how many invoices has he sent so far?
Invoices from the firm.
Yes.
Since August of 2014, I'd say to you that it is approximately 5 or 6. We're in a more regular rhythm for billing right now. We got an invoice for the month of February in March. Now we're getting an invoice for the month of March in April. So I think we seem to be in a more regular rhythm for billing at this point.
And the retainer that he was holding, we use that up.
That's correct, yes. He's applied it to the expenses and then billed us for the difference and asked for an additional retainer.
So on, any Any more questions on the legal bill? All on the motion? Did we make a motion? No, we didn't.
We did.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we did.
Seconded.
Okay. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Mr. Chairman,
Public comment?
just on that matter, for the record, that should leave us an approximate balance of $170,000 in appropriated funds.
Mhm. Any questions about that?
No, no,
Okay.
sorry.
Anyone for public comment? Mr. Yule wanted
Yes.
to make a statement.
Yeah, I'd like to make a statement with regard to Kinder Morgan. Kinder Morgan, the parent company of Tennessee Gas Pipeline LLC, notified the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, on April 20th, 2016. It is suspending the Northeast Energy Project, NED, as a result of inadequate capacity commitments from prospective customers and a determination that the project is uneconomical. However, the application remains pending before the Commission as the company is in the process of determining how best to proceed consistent with existing contracts. Kinder Morgan will be submitting a status report to FERC no later than May 26, 2016. For the moment, affected properties have a sigh of relief. More will be known on May 26 when Kinder Morgan does submit its status report. The 15-town Northeast Municipal Gas Pipeline Coalition, of which I am a liaison, played an integral part for nearly 2 years in keeping North Reading informed. It was the coalition's consistent view that the product demand Kinder Morgan claimed did not exist. We owe the coalition members a debt of gratitude for all of their hard work. Town Administrator Michael Giliberto was key to keeping an effective flow of information available to the board and the people of North Reading. He attended nearly every meeting of the coalition with me, sharing his expertise on relevant matters. House Representative Brad Jones and State Senator Bruce Tarr remained on top of the issue, providing hands-on assistance anytime it was needed. Finally, I want to thank Chairman Bob Messeri for his quiet leadership on this issue. As he has done throughout his chairmanship and on many other top priority issues, Bob managed the board effectively, ensuring that we did not make tempting decisions before it was necessary. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comments?
Just in relation to that, too, and again, I want to congratulate Jeff and his efforts, and Michael.
Oh, yeah, the school, then, that was their assignment.
Yeah, I know, they did a terrific job
Thank you.
in doing that, and additionally, I think our United States Senate delegation, the two United States senators weighed in heavily in opposition, as did Attorney General Maura Healey. So it does pay off. It does, this was a David versus Goliath, and so far so good. But we have to remain vigilant.
That's correct. We will be keeping an eye on it either way, so.
It's still shaken down to economics.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Because they
Well, yeah. How much can they pass on to the consumer?
purchasing up all these smaller energy companies to be able to pave the way. So
Well-
it had a stock effect on their stock.
Well, something I didn't include, I had written in my previous notes, the world played an impact on this too. I mean, Saudi Arabia flooded the market with oil, and it caused all of the, energy costs the costs to go down, and there's no longer any money in energy right now, except possibly renewable energy, and going in that direction. So that played a big
But there are
part.
forces working to change that.
Yeah.
so. And there are counter forces too.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. We do have a busy agenda. We have a seasonal license renewal for the Hillview Snack, and it's a common victual license. Ms. Maple.
Mr. Chairman, I move to renew the seasonal common victual license for GFMI Hillview Snacks, 149 North Street, to expire December 31st, 2016, subject to all regulatory department requirements.
Second.
Second by Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Yule.
Yeah.
Discussion?
Okay.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
We all seconded it.
It was you, Jeff?
I
Sorry.
put
Yeah, I think-
O'Leary.
Yes,
It's
it's
too
O'Leary,
late
it's
for
fine.
that, yeah.
Okay, and we have appointments, reappointments to the Board of Registrars.
Mr. Chairman,
Fourth of July committee, yes.
Before we take up that item, we have a bit of housekeeping work to do with regard to the 4th of July committee appointment prior to taking action on it with regard to the availability of associate membership seats. So we'd ask, and Jeff, I'm not sure whether Jane spoke with you about it. I think you're the liaison, right?
Yes, I am the liaison. I did see it,
We're
but,
gonna put that on our agenda for next,
It'd be my suggestion,
Yes.
just based on that.
yes, please.
what about the Board of Registrars?
That's ready
It's
to
good
go.
to go.
We're all set with that?
That's all set as far as I know.
Samantha?
Mr. Chairman, I move to reappoint the following for appointment to the Board of Registrars for a term to expire April 1st, 2019. Kylie Gamelin, 89 Park Street.
Second?
Motion by Mr. Owen.
Mr.
Second
Chairman,
by
yeah,
Mr.
the
Wood.
liaison and recommended by the Democratic Town Committee, unanimously recommended this reappointment to the Board of Registrars, I believe based upon, she has been performing the duties, and Town Clerk has no objection, is recommending the reappointment also.
Okay, Mr. Mulder. Any other discussions? Jeff?
No, that's it.
On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Okay, that gets us 5 minutes of a, wow.
Can we take up that?
I'm looking down, see if there's anything else we can do.
Can I make a
Mr.
suggestion?
Prisco?
We have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
There's been some new stuff updated into the Dropbox for this evening's meeting. Maybe you'll let 5 minutes to board members and take a look at it, because there's some new.
When was it put in? Just now?
Like the comparisons from
Oh.
from last year's and stuff like that?
That was in there since this morning.
Was, okay.
I
Mine,
mean,
it
I
just
get
popped up
everything that was in
online.
here this morning.
So, okay.
We could take a recess, if still for a couple of minutes.
I don't know.
Yeah, we'll take a 5 minute recess. 4 minute
Well, it just popped up on mine, so maybe I'll.
Yeah.
Bob and Mike,
I didn't see
Could
it.
you, would you mind, Mr. Because I'm gonna step out,
Oh, I had already seen
No.
just because. Maybe they can.
I assume you like a hard copy?
I do love hot.
And a hard copy for you, I assume?
What's that?
I
Oh,
made it
you
for-
assume?
Yeah.
Good assumption.
Completed list, yeah. This is what you were asking.
That's the one I was.
A
Yeah.
hard copy for you.
How'd you
And
know- how'd you guys make those decisions?
which decisions?
For the capital.
It was more of an
I
observation.
wasn't there. I mean, how'd you get by?
How much are you paying to make this presentation? Why aren't you using double sides?
We made it in-house. No, we made it in-house, so.
It's very nicely done. I know, poor
I
lady.
assume you wanted electronic.
I'm
Okay.
good, all set.
Did you get to look at this then? You didn't get to look at this?
I just been doing it now.
Now, what did you just get?
So this is what you had for your plans previously, and the
Right.
amount, and then whether it's complete or not, right? You had,
I actually
I
missed.
remember the board asking for this list a long time ago. I think at the strategic planning, you wanted to see if, what you had already
Right.
what you had already appropriated for,
Right.
and what was done on that, what had remained to be done.
So that was 15, 16 years.
Well, I don't see the
FY
years on
15.
it,
Oh,
right?
15 and 16. I
Yeah.
guess that's what-
There's 2 sheets to it. So FY 15
okay.
and then FY 16.
It's in the Dropbox, right?
Yeah, it's the first one in what's in today's packet. In
This is a good
this one
job.
right here.
The status of, okay, yeah. I can get this thing.
You'll
Do you
compare.
want to look at this one?
No, I should be able to handle my own Dropbox. But I'm not.
Well, I guess we'll learn about it tonight.
No, I don't like this. It keeps collapsing.
I haven't even swapped mine out
I
yet.
haven't swapped mine out yet.
Yeah, I don't care for it.
Well, you're in tax season, right? I'm in appeal
Oh,
season.
he's done that.
Oh,
Sort of.
yeah.
I am, pretty much.
You got the extensions going on.
There's people knocking on the door Tuesday morning.
Really?
We had the door locked. It was shut down. We're closed. I mean, Greg was in Mexico. Everybody's out. I'm the only one hanging out. The door was shut. I'm just doing a couple little things. Don't answer. I'm telling myself, don't answer.
They're the people that come in with the receipts in the shoebox.
One person, I said,
Get out of here. Go to
what do
eat.
you mean you're closed? Done.
It keeps falling on me.
Oh, it's debt service.
So I should keep my old thing here, put the new iPad in it. Is that what you're telling me?
Right, I agree, yeah. I didn't thought of that. I should have told him that. Can it come out? I don't think it comes out.
Of course it does.
I guess it does, yeah.
I'm sorry to do this. I just
No.
want to pull this page out.
We'll take the wins anywhere we can get him. He was actually pretty happy.
So,
And I told him to call him. Who's first? You.
yeah, because I was
Oh,
away.
I know.
Streets. They can get it done.
I hope it's only 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I told him, I said, look, I'm not.
5 minutes, that's all you can do.
15.
Just kidding.
But he was actually happy
Okay,
because he was going out of town.
listen, it's 8 o'clock to call the meeting back to order. Mr. Gilberto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In response to the feedback that we received from the board and the public at the hearing at the last meeting on the Complete Streets policy, we've had additional discussion, and the town planner, who's here this evening, has prepared a PowerPoint presentation and a question and answer that we put in the packet for tonight's meeting. So when she's ready and when the technology is cooperative, we'd love to have her go through the presentation.
Do we need to kill some lights, or can everybody see the?
That's good.
I think we're going to leave them on, Jane. Or not.
Maybe we're not.
That's it.
Better for me to stand here or?
Anywhere you like.
Probably
Wherever
at
you
the
feel
podium.
podium
comfortable.
for
Probably at the podium so people at home can
need
hear.
to hear you, unfortunately. You have to go to a mic.
That's Jimmy Judson.
Okay. Hello? Okay,
Okay, you have the floor.
all right. Thank you. So I'd like to talk about the basics of complete streets and address questions that were raised at the last meeting. I'd also like to address how we envision this policy working in North Reading, where we would and wouldn't propose using it, and how it would impact planned roadway improvements and new projects. Complete streets are, here. Oh.
Point at the computer. Danielle,
Oh,
maybe,
There's no light flashing in.
That's why
Nope.
that's why we need this.
I think it's being blocked by the,
tell you what,
that angle.
I can come around, that's fine.
if you give it to me and then you give me a signal.
I'm looking for, receiver. Receiver's not there. Put it on the other side.
I saw Liz touching it earlier, so that's all I'm gonna say.
Battery gone?
Like, that's the thing, I don't see the light coming in the front.
That's infrared.
Yeah, usually it's a flicker.
Oh, okay. I think we're okay. Thank you. Okay, that'll do it. Okay. Complete streets are designed for all users and modes of travel. Some complete elements are illustrated here: a bike lane, a crosswalk, a center median, and sidewalks. However, complete streets are context specific, so only appropriate elements that fit and would actually be used are considered for incorporation. Adopting a complete streets policy does not mean every street would need a sidewalk or a bike lane. This is a view of a busy urban street. This is New York. You
I
see
knew
elements
it.
here you would not likely see in North Reading.
Houston Street.
By contrast, this is a downtown area of a suburb. You might see some of these elements in a small or medium-sized town's business districts. This is a rural complete street. This is an example of a shared street in a rural, low-density residential setting with low traffic volumes. Again, this is context-specific, so no sidewalks, street crossings, or bike lanes are needed here. This could potentially be the situation on many of North Reading's quieter residential streets. And I should note here that the policy would not apply to our private ways and unaccepted streets. This would just be for accepted public streets. And I should also note that the goal of the policy would not be to retrofit every street in town with sidewalks and bike lanes, since the rural context of many of these roads would not be appropriate for those elements. Another example of a rural complete street solution with a multi-use path. So what are we trying to fix? These are some examples of problems complete streets elements are designed to address. Poor ADA accessibility, dangerous conditions, and an environment that discourages walking. We would like to be able to offer residents a safe walking and biking environment and to allow for better mobility for people who can't drive, such as seniors, people with disabilities, and young people, and anyone else who would like to take advantage of the health benefits of walking more. The program is funded by the
Danielle,
I'm sorry.
may I ask you to slow down a
Oh,
little
of
bit?
course,
I'm sure
yes.
there are people listening on air
Sure.
that can't follow that quickly.
Yes. The program is funded by the Transportation Bond Bill and is administered by Mass DOT. The frequently asked questions document from DOT that we included stated the program was funded for 2 years, but we've now been told it's been funded for 5. We're committing to, so in terms of the policy, what we would be committing to do would be to consider adding complete streets elements in transportation projects wherever possible and appropriate. We would need to create an advisory committee to give input into DPW's capital requests for road projects. And it's been suggested by DOT that this could include representatives from town departments and the Commission on Disabilities, for example. And we would need to create a prioritization plan of the projects we would actually like to do. So in terms of commitment, what we would need to do is review our current and future policies and plans to ensure compliance. For example, our subdivision regulations. We would need to commit to thinking about future transportation projects and plans and considering if complete streets elements can be incorporated into those. We would request funds from the program for those projects and implement them as funds became available. And we are responsible for project design. So if we can't pay for a project's design, we can't build it, nor are we obligated to build it. In terms of changes to town policies, there would likely be no or very minimal changes to our subdivision regulations. Newly created privately developed residential streets are expected to have appropriate elements, namely sidewalks. This has been the case for many years already because the subdivision regulations have required sidewalks in subdivisions for decades. Complete streets policy would and should be incorporated into a future master plan that we would do. We would not anticipate zoning bylaw changes, although we are asked to review the zoning and determine if any changes were necessary. The capital improvement planning process would now include input from an advisory committee into the DPW requests for road projects. The town has already expressed a commitment in a lot of ways to implementing complete streets elements in lots of projects throughout the town, and we have worked with consultants, planning and DPW both, over the last few years to help us plan for and prioritize things like sidewalk repairs and new installation, bike paths and lanes, and most recently a complete streets conceptual design scenario for Route 28. There would
Danielle,
be.
before you change the
Yep.
slide, you mentioned that Route 28,
Mhm.
evidently, because it's a state road, it complies to state regulations.
If the time comes for us to request, it probably would be through TIP funds to reconstruct Route 28. Any plan that any reconstruction they would do by their own policy would actually have to include sidewalks because it's now their policy to do that.
Okay, and would that be true on Route 62 too?
No, because it's a state numbered route, but it's not owned and controlled by the town.
Excuse me, Bob?
Jeff?
I wanted to follow up, excuse me, follow up on your question about Route 28. Is Reading does Reading participate in this program already, do you know?
So Reading has passed a complete streets policy that is very, very similar, almost identical to the one that we have here. It was based on kind of model state language. In terms of their status of being evaluated by the program, I don't know whether their policy has actually been approved by DOT, because once each town adopts, it has to be
Right.
approved.
The reason why I asked that question, they did some reconfiguration at the corner of Franklin. Yeah,
Mhm.
they did it. It was, do you know if that was part of
It was
that?
not part of this program because this program is very, very new. So no one has yet used construction money through this
Okay.
program. So now what towns have done is, over the last few months, towns have been completing, passing their policies, and have been submitting them to DOT and have started to be evaluated. I don't know of a town yet that has passed its evaluation yet. So soon, I'm sure we'll be hearing about towns that have had their policies actually approved.
Okay.
And at that point, they're eligible to ask for funds.
And again, Haverhill Street in Reading too has just recently undergone some new striping, creating a bike lane. And a lot of Reading, Haverhill Street also already has sidewalks, but new bike lanes and things
Right.
of that nature. What would this do in relation to if we're going to be restriping the streets?
So we could, so Haverhill Street, segments of Haverhill Street are on the DPW's list of requests for paving in the coming years. And as part of that, we would be committing to look at whether bike lanes were possible. There are a lot of segments of Haverhill Street, especially in North Reading, where the right-of-way is too narrow. And unless we wanted to start doing takings and really widening that street, which would be pretty costly, we would not be expected to do any of that. It would be great to have the bike lanes, I think, but as part of looking at the Haverhill Street sidewalk project that the CPC had designed many years ago, that I actually talked to one of the engineers who's looking at it again now, and he said most of the right-of-way is just so narrow that we can't really do that here. But that would definitely be the kind of element that we would consider for all of our paving projects. Can we stripe bike lanes? Do we want to? Are they beneficial? Will people use them? What will it cost? Do we have funds? I mean, things like striping are usually pretty low cost in comparison to sidewalk construction, but if it can be done and it's something people want, then yes, that could definitely be part of it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just, yeah, again, one of my concerns, and you're trying to allay them, I guess, is, you said right up front, where and when we would propose using it, this new policy. I guess I just get a little bit concerned about who's sitting where and who and when we want to do things and what are we going to be required to do if it's not clearly defined. If it's squishy, which appears to be a little bit squishy, which is, again, flexibility is important. And again, you were saying there may or may not be, again, there may or may not be some zoning requirements, changes.
I don't think there are. I can't think of anything in our zoning bylaw that actually addresses what our streets look like, but it's mentioned in the state's model language that will look at all of our policies and bylaws, including zoning. So yes, we should review it, but I can't think of any. I can't think of anything in the zoning that would ever, but that would be something that, as a starting point, if we were to adopt a policy and have it approved, then we would begin, we need to look at each of our policies, and we would do that in a way that was methodical and not just, oh, pretty sure it's not in here. We would actually, we would need to look at everything. Does that sort of answer your question?
Sort of, yeah.
Catherine?
Just a couple of those, which is kind of a little bit on to Mr. O'Leary's, but when you said that this would be applicable, or maybe you didn't say this, but if and when we accept the policy, once we accept it as to private ways and non-accepted streets, the policy is applicable to that, right?
No.
We can't control it because it's private property, so we can't use the state funds for those streets because they're
Okay.
private.
Okay.
And we also couldn't control, if butters have interests in, and we can't really tell them what to do on those
Okay.
streets.
All right.
So that would be a category of street that we would
not
be leaving
applicable.
alone.
And
Yeah.
then my second question is kind of along the lines of, when, in terms of DPW requests,
Mhm.
input from this advisory committee, this advisory committee, does it have sort of, what kind of authority is it? Who is it? How is it? What kind of authority does it have? It doesn't have the authority to override DPW requests, but just to maybe make suggestions on incorporating some of these design street design? or-
Yes, exactly. So it wouldn't override anything DPW wants to do, but what so the committee itself, what DOT has suggested is that towns can go about appointing their committees any way they want. I think the way we're suggesting doing it is it could be appointees either by the selectmen or by the town administrator, and it's been suggested that a good way to do it is to have DPW director, someone from planning, a representative from the Board of Selectmen, someone from the Commission on Disabilities, maybe others who have an interest or who are, whose work is aligned, possibly public health, or the health agent might be a good choice for a group like that. And that is a group that would then advise DPW as they were going about making their, planning what their capital requests were going to be. So it is up to the town how we want to do it, and I think if the board was more comfortable with it, certainly the language doesn't need to be squishy or flexible. I mean, probably it is, because that's the way the state sort of wrote the model language, but if we were more comfortable with actually spelling out exactly how this committee was going to be appointed and who these people were, I mean, I certainly would have no problem with doing that if it made people more comfortable. Just in terms of deciding how to go about doing this, that is something we are allowed to decide after a policy is adopted, but we could decide it now if that's, if we feel that that's better. I mean, not tonight necessarily, but in terms of if there still are questions or things that you would prefer to see cemented and really explicit in the language of the policy, we could, leave tonight with those things, submit another draft, and then look at it that way to maybe firm up some of those areas that you feel are still too flexible.
Okay, go on.
Okay. So there would be lots of streets in town that would not be expected to see any impact because either they're private ways or they're too small or low traffic to justify changes. There might be complete streets elements that just don't fit or aren't needed, or no work is currently being planned on them. Also, many streets in town already contain complete streets elements and wouldn't need any changes. And any reconstruction of Route 28 will have to have complete streets elements anyway, and that's by state law. And the state would be responsible for that. There's no obligation for the town to spend funds on any particular projects if those funds are not available. If we couldn't secure design funds for a certain project that we were looking at doing, we would not have to build that project. And the town is committing to considering the Complete Streets principles in its activities relating to transportation and road construction. And we would do our best to implement as many Complete Streets elements in future projects and street reconstruction where they're appropriate, but it's not mandated because they know that we may not have the funds to build everything that we would like to build. So they give us this ability to, we commit to considering it and commit to it in our planning process and our thought process, but they're not mandated in terms of we must do it, because if we don't have the money, we can't do it. For projects that we could not make Complete Streets elements work due to being very cost prohibitive, the town could still do those projects it otherwise needs and has funding for, even if the Complete Streets elements couldn't be done. And that's something we've confirmed in writing with DOT. I've had probably 8 or 10 conversations with Lou Rubito, who's the engineer at DOT who's in charge of this program, just saying, I need to make sure that we're not signing up for something that will force us and obligate us to spend money down the road because we've said we are adopting a certain policy. And I've been reassured lots and lots of ways, including in writing, that that's not the purpose and that's not the expectation. So just some other concerns. Our Chapter 90 funds are separate from this program. These funds would be, Complete Streets funds would be in addition to Chapter 91. Our current level of funding wouldn't be impacted. We can choose to use Chapter 90 funds for project designs if we wish. Our policy can be rescinded at any time if we no longer want to participate or if the state discontinued the funding program. We're only obligated to complete the projects the state has already given us funds for. And if Complete Streets elements can't be used in a project, either because they aren't appropriate or because they're not financially feasible, we're not obligated to incorporate those elements into any particular project. The state won't force us to pursue land takings or road widenings for things like bike lanes and sidewalks or for any other reason. I think the question came up at the last meeting, what other communities have passed similar policies. Most of these are based on the same model language that we've used in ours, but you can see it kind of runs the gamut between some towns that are pretty rural, like Littleton, some smaller towns like Middleton and Reading is in there, up through some very urban areas and cities. And that was up through December 2015. The process for taking advantage of the funding program would be to pass a complete streets policy that would then be approved by DOT, create a DOT-approved prioritization plan of projects we would like to request the complete streets funds for, apply for complete streets funds for each of the projects, and that comes with a time window we would expect to be looking for those funds. Enter into a contract with DOT for each project that was accepted, bid out the projects, and then receive reimbursement similar to the Chapter 91 process. The prioritization plan is basically a list, a very, very detailed list that includes new projects that we choose, such as sidewalks that are enhancing already existing streets that otherwise don't require any other work. So an example would be a sidewalk on Central Street from North Street to Park Street, what we paved recently, adding a sidewalk to that. It wouldn't be on the list for any reason other than to put a sidewalk on it. Or projects that are on the pavement management plan that are already scheduled for repaving or reclaiming that have the potential for complete streets elements to be incorporated. And the plan doesn't need to contain any street projects the town has considered and doesn't think are appropriate. I'm sorry. Like a low-use road, a very, very small, not well-traveled road. DOT doesn't need any information about those projects. They have told me, we don't need to hear about it. If you've already determined that this doesn't apply for a really small, kind of rural sort of road that you have in town and you're not going to do anything with it, you don't need to send us any information or issue any waivers. You just leave it off the plan. A waiver from the advisory committee would really only be called for in the case that we chose not to do a pretty important complete streets element that we said we wanted to do on our prioritization plan.
Excuse me, Danielle, you said a waiver from the advisory committee?
We can set it up. Currently, that's how it's set up. I added some language to the policy to make it more clear who does the waiver. Previously, I think the model language had said Board of Selectmen. I think that might be kind of a big burden to ask. So I changed it to be advisory committee or it would be CPC if it was a CPC approved project only. I think the case of a waiver would be pretty rare though, because if we didn't want to do something, we would likely not put it on the prioritization plan. I think it would be if we were planning a particular project, we all kind of agreed that it would be wonderful to include some complete streets elements, but it just wasn't going to work out. Neighbors came out and said they didn't want it, or something like that. And then I think what would happen is we would just have the advisory committee would just waive that, and we would move on. We would revise our prioritization plan and take it off.
But if the advisory committee doesn't waive it, what are the consequences? I'm just trying to get my head around the proposed process. What's that?
Nothing. I mean, we can't build it if, and DOT can't force us to build it.
I'm just getting a little bit of a mixed message as to what role the advisory committee will play, and as far as, how much teeth do they have?
Right.
Is it strictly advisory? Or it appears now that it's a little bit more than advisory if they have the authority, or they have to you have to get a waiver from them. So in other words, the projects have to be approved by them, or recommended by them, approved by them, and now they have to be waived by them. And therefore, if there's a conflict of ideas, the advisory committee chooses not to waive it, then I know earlier on in the presentation it says the project can move forward, but I'm not sure based upon what I'm hearing. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, you said the project would be?
Well, earlier in the presentation it said the project could move forward, but now we're saying it can move forward if we get a waiver.
You don't actually need a waiver, and we can change the language to make that more explicit. You're right that that's not clear, and I hadn't thought of it that way until you pointed it out, but I don't really think that a waiver, some towns have set this up this way, where they're committing to doing everything everywhere, and otherwise, if it's not, then the selectmen have to waive it. We're not suggesting that. I think it's way too onerous, and it's not realistic. So if we would be more comfortable with avoiding any mention of any kind of a waiver. I don't think the word waiver is actually used, but I can revisit
I'm not,
the criteria.
and again, depending upon how it's going to be structured, and again, I'm not clear yet. You know, I look at an advisory committee as strictly an advisory committee, you know, with no authority to make or break the decision-making process. But when you now return saying you have to go back to them to get a waiver, that's a little different.
I don't think that you actually do. And if I need to clarify the language that's in the policy or the way that I'm explaining it, then that might be the right approach, because in terms of a formal waiver,
I think it's important to have the dialogue, you know, a public dialogue as to proposed plans, what we'd like to include, costs associated with it, why it's important to spend the additional funds and maybe seek some additional funding to go after it, so on and so forth. And then if it isn't economically feasible, well, it isn't economically feasible.
right.
But if the advisory committee or whatever structure you're going to propose here has some sort of a requirement to approve that waiver, you know, then I get a little bit more concerned about allowing projects to move forward. And really, who's having the final say on it? You know, who really does set the prioritization and has the final say as to which projects are to move forward based upon our desire, as opposed to the feasibility, economic feasibility, or even impact on neighborhoods that necessarily too enamored by the proposals. I
Like
just,
this, we follow the Chapter 90 process, right? The state grants us an amount of money, but we can't draw that money without submitting what we're gonna do with it. So I'm thinking in terms of the overall process here, it's not quite the same, but it has some similarities in that, well, and it may even tie into what we're doing from a Chapter 90 point of view. We're gonna repay Haverhill Street. We're gonna apply to the state to line Haverhill Street with a bike path. Or we're going to improve the sidewalks on Haverhill Street, or there may be some areas that don't have sidewalks, that we're gonna put them in, which are gonna fall into this category versus Chapter 90. So we make the proposal to the state, get approval for the grant, and then go to town meeting for whatever supplemental funds are required?
It can be done that
Or do we
way.
need to get town meeting to approve the use of those funds? On Chapter 90, we do, right? We approve. Yes, Michael?
So with regard to the process, we use two major funding sources for road reconstruction. The Chapter 90 allocation from the state each year, and then, depending upon the fiscal year, town road
Right.
appropriations. Those two generally are about $800,000, depending upon the year. And you'll see later on this year, we're only recommending going forward with a Chapter 90, but that'll be part of the capital improvement plan presentation. So we asked town meeting to authorize the expenditure of the funds, but town meeting is not asked to authorize what particular projects it's identified for. So in terms of any additional interaction, I don't anticipate it being beyond the approval of the Chapter 90 allocation to be expended and/or the town road appropriation.
Yes, Michael?
Yeah, my understanding is the Chapter 90 money would only be used potentially for any kind of upfront design work, but the actual cost would come from this Complete Street Fund, right? to implement.
That's right.
No,
So,
I understood that. What I was talking about is, you still have to get authorization for town meeting to spend this money.
Not on the details like this is talking about. Oh.
Well, that's the question.
Well, that's the
I-
thing, if it's an
No.
advisory committee that is taking input, or is making a deliberation, or making a vote on a waiver, or, then it's more than just, advise, recommending. It's more of a, it can have the ability to override,
No,
so.
but there's a
No,
funding
I-
source that comes to the town meeting has to approve it, I would guess. Our finance department, has to manage those funds and probably file a report back to the state. They don't just throw money at you and do what you want.
the advisory committee really doesn't have ultimate authority over whether we do a project or not. They're telling, the advisory committee really is telling the DPW, advising them as far as what to ask for. Those projects all have to be approved in the normal way that they're approved through the capital planning process and our other processes that we have. In terms of how we would decide to pursue funds for a particular project design, that would be really at the discretion of, well, how do we ask for this funding? If DPW thought that it was most appropriate to apply Chapter 90 funds to a project design, that would be a decision that they would make and that they would pursue the funds that way. If they thought it was more appropriate as a town meeting article, then that would be something that town meeting would vote. But there's no committee that could force any of those decisions. So there's no advisory committee that could say, can change anything that the capital planning committee, voted or that town meeting voted. That advisory committee really is telling DPW what they think they should be asking for. Ultimately, I think it really is DPW's decision as far as what they will ask for. The word waiver is the wrong word to use. I can go back and revisit the language that's in the policy to make sure it's very, very clear that the advisory committee doesn't have that kind of authority where they have any kind of decision-making over whether the funds get spent or not.
Or whether a project moves forward or not, with or without the.
Yes, exactly.
My
Program.
question was more, not necessarily related to what the advisory committee can do or can't do. I was just trying to get a better handle on what the overall process is.
Mm-hmm.
Where are the controls in terms of authorizing an expenditure? And,
I think it would
how
be
that managed.
in any way that the DPW, if DPW had a particular project design that it wanted to do for anything, at times it's asked the CPC for Community Development Fund money, at times it's used Chapter 90. I think it would really be at their discretion to decide how they wanted to pursue it, but it would still need to be approved. So in terms of impact on future projects, this is a list, and it's a little hard to read, but this is a list of the streets that DPW is putting in their request for capital for the next 3 years that they are planning and hoping to pave for 3 years. I just wanted to talk a little bit about specifically how a policy like this would impact that work. In a case like Central Street, which has already been paved, the only request through the Prioritization Plan and through the Complete Streets program would be to request funds to pay for a sidewalk. And this could be requested in an upcoming year pending availability of funds to do a design. Several of these streets or segments already have sidewalks, and so that wouldn't be a requested element in a prioritization plan. And some examples would be, Haverhill Street from Park to Foley, Charles Street, Bow Street, and the subdivision roads that are all in here all have sidewalks. Subdivision roads tend not to need any additional sidewalks or crosswalks or bike lanes. They're just not really an appropriate context for that. In cases such as Chestnut Street and Lowell Road that are planned for paving, we would not delay these projects just because we want a sidewalk.
Yes. May I?
Yes, Jim.
Yeah, I can't quite read that, it's a little unfocused, but do you have Park Street from Redmond to Concord Street on there?
Park Street,
You had it right. Right there. Perfect. Nope, you had
You
it.
had it?
no, that's not on their list.
How do I get that on that list? Because that's definitely needed
There you
there.
go, right there.
It's
Oh,
highly
those are-
traveled with young kids.
Those were just the DPW decisions.
Okay,
Those were just DPW's decisions for what
Well-
they were going to ask for.
yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I believe, if I understand from the capital presentations that we've heard, those are driven by the pavement management plan. I don't know that they're necessarily arbitrarily identified. I believe that there's some sort of a report that the consulting engineer has provided to identify those locations relative to the quality of the pavement, how fast it's deteriorating, and allocating the funding appropriately. So I think that's where that came from, although I didn't have the conversation with the town engineer.
So is there a way to get a street on there?
I think the first stop would be to evaluate on the pavement management plan where they evaluated it and to understand why they evaluated it that way. That would be the first thing I would identify. And I think that we have that as part of the capital plan, but I can check my notes after the meeting.
Well, I think there's two aspects of this that the board is concerned with. One is if we apply, we're going to do a particular road and we're applying for money for sidewalks that's not part of our Chapter 90 program at that particular time or year. And we don't get the money. Based on this program, if it's been approved to go forward and we don't get the state money, are we obligated to put in the sidewalk?
No.
And
No.
Definitely not.
I'm reading this as saying no. And the other is if a plan is proposed to put in a bike path or sidewalks, and the state has got $50 million on a bunch of communities asking for the money, you don't get enough to do the whole thing. Are you obligated to do the whole thing? Or do you just do whatever the allocation of funds are?
Well, it's whatever, so if we ask for a specific project and we don't get it approved that way, it would be our decision whether we wanted to pursue the project. If they suggested changes that we didn't want to do, we wouldn't necessarily have to proceed with it.
All right, so when you apply for a project, you've defined the costs, and they're going to either approve to fund all of it or none of it.
That's my impression, that it's a yes or no question. That
Right,
it's,
you can't
yeah.
submit without a project design, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and then once they get the project design, and the advisory committee submits it to the DPW director, and he or she approves it, then that's what gets forwarded. If it gets changed, augmented in any way by the state, and the DPW director doesn't like it, then we don't go forward with it.
Right, right. I wouldn't really foresee that. I mean, I think that I think everyone would know, if there were going to be changes to the design, we would know about that before any kind of contract was done.
Right.
Because we have to have a contract with each of these with DOT, agreeing to exactly what we're doing and how much money they're giving us to do it.
Jeff?
Yeah. We are responsible for the cost for plan and design, correct?
Yes.
All right, so if we do one year and there are not enough funds to do the plan from the state, how long does that plan and design remain as a bona fide plan and design going in the future? Supposing that we have to wait 3 years before they provide us funds, do we have to do another plan and design?
No, the Haverhill Street sidewalk plan, that's been around for 10 years?
10 years.
Yeah.
The thing that the state is gonna look for are the cost, how much material, the cost, and things like that, the actual design guidelines from an engineer. The hard numbers don't change, the dollar signs may change, but that'll be good for 4 to 5 years. Because we asked that question when we were asked to expend money for that, for Haverhill Street, again, to get that design document up so we can put it, it's actually a bid document is what we're doing right now. So they do a design, we have to do a design for the sidewalk or the street or whatever, and then a bid document to put it out to bid. And when they do the bid documents, the design won't change unless there's some drastic engineering change out there. But the bid documents would be good for 3 to 4 years. And those could be tweaked very easily by tweaking the numbers, the cost numbers within it. The amount of material won't change, that's hard. It's gonna be so many tons of asphalt or so many yards of concrete. That won't change, the cost may change, it may be beyond what the escalation numbers they put in it. So that may change, and they just have to revise it.
So the plan and design remains, but the bid doc can change.
Yeah,
Because prices change.
You can take that, easily change it, easily modify that later on if you needed to, if it was out beyond its age.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions on this?
I love the program.
For those projects that we already have planned, but that we would love to include a sidewalk on, we go ahead and pave them. There's no reason to delay them unless DPW thought, wow, we'll have a much better project, and we would prefer it's to the town's advantage to wait to pave something. But that would really be their call if they wanted to recommend that.
Do they have an obligation to respond within some time frame?
The
project?
state?
Yes.
You mean if we were to apply for a certain project, like
Right.
for funds? I don't know how long it takes to actually get approved. I don't think they know yet either, because so far there haven't been applications for construction yet. And so
They're supposed to be.
there will be soon, and it could be lots of towns applying at once, or it could just be a few. I mean, from the number of towns that have passed policies, probably it's going to be a lot, competitive money. But they haven't told us what that timeframe is
Well,
yet.
I'm just thinking of, typically, if we're gonna go do a street and we're gonna do sidewalks, while we dig, and I'm talking about not just a paving job, I'm talking about redoing the street. We're digging it up down to gravel, and we're gonna put sidewalks in. It would be cost effective to do it all in one project and
Yes.
do the street and then dig the sidewalks up 2 years from now and install them, I would think.
Yeah, that is true. I think that if we'd had the funds to do a sidewalk on Central Street, we definitely would have, but it needed to be paved. You know, Haverhill Street, same thing. You know, DPW had asked the CPC to fund from the Community Development Fund the money to put in a sidewalk in that segment, knowing we wanted it and it was more cost effective to do it, but we didn't have enough money. So it didn't happen. Yeah, ideally, yeah, it would happen all at once. But if we really needed to repave a street, there would be no reason why we couldn't do it if DPW thought
I
we
understood
have to
that.
go
I was
and
trying to
pave
get a
it.
sense of if we have a project
Mhm.
on hand and we submit it,
Mhm.
and we'd really like to get the street done this next season, and, you know, we have to wait 2 years for the state to come
I don't
across and
think it'd
approve
be-
something.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't be 2 years. Probably be a few weeks, but
The state suggested that we don't rush this plan for us, because they knew we had a design package done, and that we could get the bid docs done
Mhm.
quick enough for them. They couldn't turn around the contract, not saying that the funds were gonna be approved. They couldn't turn the contract around with the town fast enough. They need 6 to 8 weeks to do that. So that's not approving the project, that's just hammering out the details, the lawyer
Mhm.
details with the thing. So, and I think once they have one with the town, they'll be able to model that the next time around with that same town. So that's, I think, the longer part of it. It's not the appropriating the funds to the town, it's getting the contract for it.
Okay, so the decision and when we had the hearing and we continued it was to make a determination whether or not the board wanted to recommend adopting this. And I don't know where we are at this point and whether we have other questions. Do we have other questions?
How do you feel?
I'm concerned.
What do you feel like?
Yeah, can you weigh in for us, Michael?
I think
Michael?
I just asked him quietly, I said, do you want to make a recommendation, or do you have one, you know?
So if we conclude the presentation, just to,
yes,
okay.
thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Well,
Don't go away.
don't go far. I think we heard some concerns with regard to maybe putting additional parameters on the program that are maybe unique to North Reading. Maybe we could spend some more time doing that to address some of the concerns. But, you know, I think it would be helpful for Danielle and I to have an understanding that, you know, does that, if we put those parameters in for what it means for North Reading, is that going to address the overall concerns on the board's part? I think that would probably help us. I think that it would, but I don't want to make that presumption and then, you know, not have addressed the board's concerns when we review this again.
I'll ask the board members, where are we on this? Where are you?
I mean, it sounds like a win-win situation to me. Provided that we just make the clarification to the language that is a little bit concerning for us, that I think you know exactly what language that is, just with regard to the advisory committee, but it doesn't sound like there would be any, if we're not obligated, we're not bound, we're not forcing private development compliance, which I think would be hard to do anyway, but and we can go after this money. The design elements are reasonable, it sounds to me like, and we'd have the option to say no if they weren't suitable. So, I mean, I don't see that this, why I'd be in favor of it myself.
Jeffrey, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I guess when the state comes down with programs such as this, as they have done in other programs, especially specifically in school programs, but you get unfunded situations. The concerns that I have is, you know, you can opt in, and it's said that you can opt out. Okay, and it sounds like a very maybe it's too good to be true scenario, but so I'm concerned about the opting out and changes going forward that would put us in a corner of changes that have been made that put other requirements on us. I think the question was asked, if we started a project, and I think Bob asked the question, it couldn't finish the project for some reason or another. You know, what happens under that circumstance? And the other issue is, as I said, at the expense of repeating myself, if they make changes going down, if they start mandating requirements with complete streets, that might put us in a situation where we'll have all these ideas, but won't have any funds because of new restrictions that they put on, because now it's done by the state. And so that's a concern that I have. I don't know if it's merited in this case, but you know, sometimes you look far ahead and you say, well, you can see things happening. So that's the concern that I have. So.
Well, I don't see any restrictions tied to opting out at this point. Of course, if they change it downstream, well, then you still should have an option to opt out. But this is by the way, public hearing, and I don't know if there's anyone out in the audience that have a comment, but we would certainly like to hear it. But you're going to have to come to the podium or to a table with a microphone, one or the other.
Can I just just
ahead.
because you just said it, Mr. Yule, it almost sounds to me like that this is sort of moving us forward. Here's funds available to get this in place. It would have a long-term commitment just for maintenance and upkeep and stuff, but it doesn't sound to me like it's going to be, well, now we're going to impose this condition,
Right.
and now we're going to impose that.
You're right, it doesn't
To
sound
me, it
that
sounds
way.
like
It doesn't sound that way.
modernize and put these elements in, and then we'll have the long-term requirement to upkeep, but it's given us the boost that we need to get it done. That's what it sounds
Right.
like to me, although, you know, financial considerations, obviously, that's.
And as a follow-up to Karen, before I let Megan talk, is that if you have a bike lane and you stripe the bike lane, then, a year from now, it's all washed out. Now it's on you, I guess,
Yeah,
to
right.
Yeah.
So you have those kinds of costs that you have to take into consideration. Putting in a sidewalk, well, it has a much longer life, it's
Right.
a little different situation. Megan, you had a question?
I have a question. Meg Robertson, 374 Park Street. It's just not about funding complete streets, because one thing Mass DOT realized is that cities and towns are using Chapter 90 funds just for roads. And Chapter 90 funds can be used for transportation enhancements like sidewalks, accessible pedestrian signals, curb cuts, and whatnot. Cities and towns have been focused on roads and not using it for anything else. Part of their push, because I did go to the training that they did for the 101 Complete Streets funding, was they want towns and cities and towns to start thinking about incorporating this, not just money-wise, but also, for example, Park Street, where I live, is a very wide street. And I've had discussion with the two past DBWs, can we look at the striping? Can we think of putting a bike lane in or wide enough? is there enough room or whatnot, because it's paint, you paint it every year. If you extend or narrow or extend the parking lanes, they're not parking lanes, but whatever they call them, make them narrower for the street, it looks like the street's got narrower and it will slow traffic down. It's a traffic calming thing to do that doesn't cost anything because you're painting it like you do every year because it's worn out. No one's been able to get back to me on that and why it's not done or whatever. Or is there enough room to put a bike lane on one side or the other because of the size of the street? That's a planning issue that you start thinking about, and that's an easy solution. Also looking at the corners of the streets. And I'm going to use 62 even though that project was interesting. But the wide corners that they put in on all those side streets, you didn't need that big of a wide corner when you're crossing one of the side streets off 62, the side street entrance into those side streets are much wider than they really need to be. They just over-designed the radius on the curbs. And that Complete Streets would start looking at that. Why are you doing that? Why do we need that big curb and you're in the street crossing more than you need to be? This is what you mentioned it's another set of funding to encourage cities and towns, if they're not going to use their Chapter 90 funds for these enhancements, then now the state says if you do this plan and that you meet all the criteria when you submit your plan in, it meets all what we want, you're eligible to get these funds. Ask Chapter 90 and go through the process, you're eligible, and it's giving more money because they know cities and towns are using all their Chapter 90 money for roads and nothing else. So again, it's a win-win, I think, and requirement, if the money goes away, the money goes away, but the policy could remain in regards to looking at other things and incorporating, even with CPC, of having sidewalks that walk from the main sidewalk into the Dunkin' Donuts, that you don't have to walk through a parking lot. You would also look at those issues and enhance it in an overall view for the town in regards of looking at what's going to be better for bikers and pedestrians, not just for cars. So
Thank you.
that's my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Prisco.
Just to try to summarize my thoughts real quick on this, I just see this as such a win for the town, and with no risk. I don't really see there any risk associated with it. And you can use this slide as a perfect example. You have over 30 projects up on this slide over the next 3.5 years, and 10 of these projects don't even have sidewalks on them. But at least gives now a DPW director that has these projects already planned, he can use this program to enhance these projects. He's already going to be on the road doing construction work anyway, so now if he has an opportunity to add a project design in to add an amenity like a sidewalk where we don't have them, or a bike path, or something like Megan was explaining up there with them widening certain areas or shrinking certain areas for speed control, this enhances the program. And if it's an acceptable project design by the state under this program, they're going to grant us the money with no cost to the town, with maybe some future maintenance, but we're going to have maintenance on our roads forever anyway. So it's a win. This is a win.
All right, so we have someone else that.
I wanted to-
wanted to talk. Did you want?
Yes, please.
Jeff can wait his turn.
Okay, thank you. Jane Krieger, 22 Cherry Street. And yes, I think it's a great idea because if you look at the model rule, it's about health and safety for really everybody. Oh, I'm sorry. And then I was just wondering, the model rule, I noticed North Reading has changed it a little, so I'm wondering what were the changes and the waiver and all that. And then could we get a copy of this? Because as an
Sure.
example, Mr. Yule mentioned the sidewalk from Redmond to wherever. And another example is Central Street, where, as I understood it, there are plans for the sidewalk. So I think it's important that, you encompass the idea
Just to
for
clarify,
the town.
that list where it says yes and no,
I can't see that.
is defining what our existing sidewalks.
Where would they put sidewalks on
It's
Center?
not
Hmm?
saying, well, we're gonna go forward and build a sidewalk there.
Right.
That's just a record
That's
of
what
what
you just said.
exists on that list.
So I guess my question is, how is North Reading draft compared to the model rule? And if this is adopted for specific projects now, because, you know, Central Street has been on the board for a while, and there was another one. So I guess there are a lot that may or may not be on the list, I guess. How would we find out? And
Several
could we get a
years
copy
ago,
of that?
the DPW director, with the help of a consultant, took a look at how we could maintain the condition of our roads more effectively within the budget that we have. You know, we have Chapter 90 and we have some town funds that we
I saw
We
that.
don't have unlimited funds.
I have a copy.
And the idea was to take and roads that are really deteriorated, the only thing to do is to rebuild them. Roads that are brand new, the way you prevent them from getting into a state of deterioration, you do maintenance on, crack filling, things like that. And then there are roads in between where resurfacing will extend the life of the road. So the plan that he's put together is based on a budget, and it's based on selecting those roads to try to provide some reasonable level of quality of roads within the town of North Reading.
I remember that report, and I do have a copy. So I guess that's my question, if, you know, maybe this could be available for the public so we could get a copy, or I would like a copy. And then, how would it be implemented? Would it be a new committee that then puts them on the street? The model
Questioner.
rule relates to that. So those were my questions. And as
Well, I
an
think
example,
that's defined as an overview in the, would come along with the adoption of policy. And from there, I don't know whether the CPC takes a charge of forming a committee, or
well, the
Yeah,
bylaw
or
says the
selectmen.
selectmen, so that's why I was wondering
Selectmen
how
or
much
the
it's
town
going to
administrator.
change.
or TA.
Has it been
One or the
changed
other.
from the draft then, though?
I think our draft says town administrator.
That's what I thought it said originally.
Yeah, town administrator, I
Does.
thought.
Yeah, okay.
And there were some changes from the, but I think you were saying we were changing that. And a lot of it's the coordination, too, which is very important and very good. So it just sort of, you know, gets everyone thinking, all the departments, and it lists them. And as an example, Swan Pond was a private road, but now it's public. So that's an example where the model rule addresses private roads, and yet I take that I got from this bylaw would say, oh, no, they're out. But, you know, safety's for everyone. I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Okay, well, thank you. Jeffrey, you had a
Yes, yes. Because Megan brought up something very interesting about Chapter 90 funding. All of the Chapter 90 funding that we get always goes to the roads, and nothing ever seems to go to the sidewalks. So it begs the question here is, all of this can be done under Chapter 90, correct? We could have done this under, I'm not saying we had the money, that's a different question.
Oh,
but
if
it
we
all
had
can be
enough
done.
money?
Eligible.
So you don't,
Sure.
so
yeah.
this is just a, for lack of a better description, this is just another,
This is additional money.
I know it's
But it's
additional, I understand
focused
that. No,
It's an
no.
augmentation.
Yeah, it's an augmentation. So it's another plan and another way for state money to come down to the towns. Okay? It also means that that's all more, and maybe I should be in the Senate arguing this point, but that means that there's more money going from increased taxes going into the state to be able to fund this program. So I look at that as well. So the question is then, why haven't we used Chapter 90 funding
Because there's
in
not
our
a-
sidewalks?
The basic answer to that is, there's not enough, and we're trying to maintain our roads.
Right, to
And
maintain the
number
current
of-
infrastructure
I
we
understand.
have,
I
and
understand.
then to
But it's
So
also
then-
supplement
will, it's also
so then
sidewalk,
my-
right? I mean,
yeah, I know, I
sidewalks are
understand.
based on
I
priority.
mean, this might not be the place for my point. I realize that. But why don't they just take that money and put it into Chapter 90
No,
funding and
because
give,
then it would,
you know?
And the bottom line,
Then it
then it
wouldn't
would
fix any of
definitely
it.
go
It's
into
the
the
same
road.
difference.
It wouldn't fix any of
If
it.
we can get some of
I
our
think
taxpayer money back,
that,
it's.
we gotta wrap this up because we gotta still have a long agenda, and we've spent
If
30
they want to
minutes
give it
more
back to
than
us, let's take it.
originally was
Well, that's the
allocated
other
on
argument
this.
too, right?
Yeah.
And it's been a good discussion. Both Catherine and Michael have said it appears to be a win-win. Steve's concerns are related to, are we getting ourselves into something that we can't get out of?
Well, that's part of it, and also, it's more, again, I don't disagree, it can be a win, and it can be a win-win. I'm not disagreeing with that. My concern is implementation here at the local level as to how are we planning on implementing it? What role is this advisory committee going to be playing based upon, what's been proposed here? And I'm also interested in knowing what the CPC's vision is in relation to off-site improvements from, private developers, which, we've imposed certain things on private developers, if you quid pro quo, if you do this here and you take care of that over there, are they going to be incorporating, some of this new programming into that? And I think that's some of the concerns that I've heard from private individuals and contractors in town in relation to the proposal.
I could address that last point if you'd like me to.
Yeah, fine.
So the CPC can't really memorialize off-site improvements. They can't really codify it into any of their regulations because off-site improvements are really something that can be voluntarily agreed to by a developer,
Voluntarily.
but can't be forced and can't be put into our subdivision regulations. So the answer to that would be no, I don't see the CPC changing its policy on off-site improvements.
Okay, at this point, what I'd like to do is to close the public hearing. There's been a suggestion that TA and CPC, whether it's Danielle, make some adjustments to it so it's a little clearer, and then we can vote to adopt it at a forthcoming meeting. Does that make sense for everybody? Yes, Michael?
We under any restricted timeline right now?
That's what I was just gonna ask.
No, so the first time, when we did the first reading, we and DOT, working together, had hoped that there was a chance we could put everything in place in time to take advantage of up to $400,000 in construction costs in the current fiscal year. As this has evolved, DOT has said there's no way that we could make that happen. No one's getting construction money this fiscal year. So, no, we should take the time to make sure the policy
Good.
is something you're comfortable with.
And that $400,000 was statewide money.
No, per
just
community,
us.
up to per community.
Up to here
Up
for
to
this
the amount that they
community.
have.
Get into this project, because they're gonna close it out, I think.
Right, but I think what we heard at the last meeting was the state isn't even ready to implement the program yet.
They
So
would not be.
So it's not gonna happen in the current fiscal year anyway.
Right.
They couldn't get us under contract
Right.
fast enough. So we don't have to race to try to do it this fiscal year, is what I'm saying.
Right.
And
I mean,
I'm
we
not
should pass the
suggesting
policy if we
kick
can.
the thing down, keep kicking it down the road. All I'm saying is there's been a couple of good suggestions. I think we've got input from the public. We've debated it for quite a while. I think a lot of our concerns have been put to bed based on this evening's discussion. I think it has an opportunity to bring more money into the town and deal with things that are sorely needed. And if Michael and Danielle can clean that document up and have it ready for our next meeting to vote on, I think that would be more than adequate. If that works for everybody, then,
Yeah, I don't know if the next meeting, I don't know if the next meeting might be too ambitious for them, but,
well,
yeah.
then 2 meetings from now. I'll leave that up to both of them. Are you ready to make a comment, or are you just?
Just talking about the schedule.
Okay. It doesn't have to be our next meeting.
No, it doesn't, there isn't a sense of urgency, and I agree with the chairman, we don't necessarily want to keep kicking it down the road either.
Right.
But there's an awful lot on everybody's plate here, too, at the same time.
So, based on that suggestion, assuming, we're not really jeopardizing anything, I would suggest we go to the meeting of May 23rd. We'll have the warrant closed, and it'll be on its way to being mailed. We do have the hearing scheduled for that evening, but we won't have we shouldn't have much action to take at that point, other than
Okay.
perhaps a few lingering recommendations. I think May 9th may be a little more challenging, especially given the late hour that we're at and not having started recommendations this evening.
All right, let's see if we can move on with some of this other stuff a little more efficient.
Thank you.
Capital Improvement Planning Committee,
Mr. Kelleher.
Mr. Kelleher, do you need this?
Yeah.
Okay, you should. Gets a little warm, too. Right,
Oh,
it's hot to the touch.
What was, what time is it?
It might take a little longer to warm
Well,
back up.
I think 9th and,
He said May 28th. 23rd, is that?
is it the, hold on, let me look at the
Yeah,
calendar.
we have a meeting that day, in case you didn't know.
Just trying to see.
It's gonna take a little longer to fire that lamp up, because I just
April, May. The 9th and the 23rd, yeah.
23rd. I don't have it in.
I had the 23rd in, but I don't have the 9th
Why
in.
do I not have it in there?
I have the 9th.
Do you have the 23rd?
Yeah.
do.
How come, why don't
I don't know. You were too busy taking notes.
I? I don't think so.
I don't know if she said it again or not.
Steve, who was Megan? What was her last name?
What's that?
Megan's last name?
Yeah, it's coming up now.
Robertson.
Yeah, Meg Robertson.
Meg Robertson.
Meg
It's
Robertson. Yeah,
Okay, she's with, she's on a
disabilities,
disabilities. And something else too.
yeah.
Okay.
Recycling?
Thank you.
You almost lost me there. You almost lost me.
How's that?
2-1.
I was ready to do the Heimlich.
I do have.
No, I'm fine, I just,
I talked to Mary Poppins over the status of 15,
Afterwards,
I'm sure she's got something on Kelly.
That is true. That is true. Watch this.
Does this, this will do it?
He wants
It
to.
was working, it was
Are you
working,
sure?
yeah.
Oh,
I
that
know
won't
you
work.
guys like healthy
You wanna drive?
snacks.
I'll drive.
cupcakes.
First, our entire committee is here this evening.
I can do it.
The vice chair, Liz Rourke, our clerk, Janine Embriano, Mike Conley, Abby Hurlbut, Joe Fode, Mike Gilberto, Steve O'Leary, and Jeff Yule, and me. So we've got our whole committee here, so if you've got questions, we should be able to answer them for you.
Okay.
Last year, you, Mike, asked that we give you an update as part of the presentation of where we stand on previous year's approvals. And this is the fiscal 15, so this is 2 years ago. And as you can see, quite a bit of it is complete. There's some things that are still ongoing and will be completed I would imagine most of them this year. The turnout gear for the fire department, they still have some more to do there. The phone upgrade in the schools, that hasn't started yet. The funds have been encumbered. There's a little bit left on 4 other projects there, but for the most part, we're in pretty good shape on what is going on from fiscal 15. On 16, there's a little bit more undone, or in process. Computer equipment for IT, some of it is purchased, and still more to come. The road program, we, in addition to Chapter 90, which was about $500,000 last year, a little bit more than that, there was $100,000 out of the capital plan as well. There's still some money left on the roads, not a lot, about $60,000. The trucking for the cemeteries is done. The parking lot at the Hood School, part of that has been done, and you'll see in this year's plan, the balance of it, which will incorporate what's left over from last year, plus an appropriation for this year. Will take care of the entire project. It'll be done at one time. The fire station improvements is not started yet. Again, when we look at this year's recommendation, you'll see that we've got plans in recommending this year. The sewer, FEIR, is not yet started. The rehab, a couple of town offices is underway. The GIS town-wide base map is not started yet. I think the flyover has been done, but I think as far as we've gone with that. The water FEIR has not started yet. The meter replacement, the $1.7 million, that hasn't started yet either, and I'm not sure when that's going to go. I'm guessing it's all going to be tied in with the MWRA project and having a DPW director on board to get that project shepherded through. That was obviously a big one, and if you may remember on that one, the projection was that the savings in water revenue that is currently lost because of the old meters will be enough to satisfy the debt service on this. So sooner rather than later is good, but we have to have the resources in place to plan and to execute a project that big. We just don't have that right now.
Tom, would you go back to FY 2015?
Sure.
Sure, Liz would be happy to.
Can we go backwards?
I can do from here if you need me to.
Yeah.
So, we're talking about a whole year now gone by on the school department project not yet going, not yet started. And the West Village upgrade wells. So I guess I have a concern. We allocate capital for a fiscal year. I can understand that, you know, like, some of the projects take a longer period of time. So the fact that when I look at 2016, some of them maybe necessarily haven't got off the ground. But I do get a little concerned about the previous year.
I'm not sure. Can you speak to the phone?
Yes.
And I'm not necessarily picking on the school, because
But a project 2 years out ought to have some progress in it.
Yeah, we had fully planned to start implementing the phone project really last summer, and I think what we had done the implementation with the high school, middle school project funds and installed the same system. And we learned a lot that what we had originally thought the existing wireless infrastructure at the elementary schools would be able to support the voice over IP system that was planned to be installed. Through the last school year, when we kind of learned a lot about some of the limitations of the high school, middle school, the old high school system, certainly Dr. Daly in particular grew increasingly concerned that if we moved forward with the project, there could be some issues given the status of our Wi-Fi infrastructure. So we've just continued to evaluate what needs to be done to ensure that the backbone of that wireless infrastructure at the elementary schools can fully support the voice over IP system that we plan to install. It's still something that we need to do. The existing systems have its limitations. They're not going to last forever. At the moment, they're working, and it's providing what is needed, but it does need to be upgraded. And we hope to align that project with an upgrade of the Wi-Fi infrastructure. So we hope that will happen in the near future.
There was a request in the 2017 budget originally for a Wi-Fi project in the elementary schools. That had been pulled back so that they could study it further and also look for some grant money. So there may be some offsetting grant money, and it wasn't clear just how much the programs have changed, and there may be a fairly substantial amount of grant money. So that's going to come back next year.
Correct. Yeah.
The West Village well upgrades, I want to say that this is tied to the MWRA decision, but I'm not positive of that, putting money into the wells, is that correct, Mike?
No, my understanding was we needed to do that regardless of what we did with MWRA.
Yeah, I apologize, Mr. Chairman, I just don't have an update with regard to that project at this point. I'd have to check with DPW and get back to you.
I mean, if that's
Yeah.
the case, that we don't need to do it, then we ought to reallocate those funds.
We gotta do it. We gotta do it.
Yeah,
It was,
I
it's
think
a
that
needed
was-
project. I think it is a little,
Yeah.
they're obviously delayed.
We'll talk to the folks at Water
All right,
Enterprise,
well,
talk with
that's-
Mark and see where we are.
You know, that's what caught my eye
Yeah.
when you showed that.
All right.
We'll go back to 216, just.
Okay, yeah.
The legal list. There are a number of items that, on 2016, sorry, Liz, is there something I can do where I'm so close? Okay.
We only have 2 pages that
That's it. We're good. We're not going back. We're good.
There's 3 or 4 that are not started. We understand the FEIR on the
Sewer.
Yeah,
sewer.
we'll get there.
It says water, though.
There's 2 of them.
There's two. There's one for sewer and there's another one for water.
Yeah.
Because right now they're going in parallel paths. At some point they may separate, but right now it's
Yes,
parallel
those-
paths.
Well,
And,
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
Mr.
Michael's got a comment.
So, excuse me, the 2 FEIR projects are both regulatory in nature.
Yeah.
Prescribed by the process that we're in, we're only in the draft environmental impact report
Oh, okay.
status for those. We had sought appropriations for those 2 final permitting projects as a safeguard. We're very confident that we'll be advancing to
I
FEIR
thought
in the
we
water.
had- I thought the DEIR is done.
No, no.
No.
Why did I-
So the draft environmental impact report was submitted in February. It's
Right.
under review by a variety of state agencies at this point in time. I don't know whether we've completely expended the DEIR appropriation, but I don't believe we have at this point. The FEIR is for additional permitting in a phase that we're not in at this point in time.
Okay.
For sewer, we're less likely to advance to that stage,
Right,
as you know.
exactly, right. 'Cause we're splitting it off. Okay. All right, sorry, Don.
All right?
Yep.
Okay.
Bob, I'm sorry.
While you're, just on
Oh, I'm
that, the
sorry.
topic of the incomplete or the partially complete, so you have like, for example, on this one too, you have the Phase 1, Hood School, Phase 1, partially complete, and then in what we're being asked to approve is Phase 2, an additional amount for Phase 2 of that.
There is on the,
See, it's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down. But if this is for fiscal year.
yeah, that's, the school development Phase 1, they did back part of the parking lot, they didn't finish all of the work with the money that's being requested in the 2017 capital program. With what's left over there will be enough money to complete the project. And it will be done at one time. There was concern about doing that next phase and then waiting and doing the final phase, and you end up with more seams in the project. So it was decided that it made more sense, they finished off what was logically could be done, and to hold off and do the balance of the project as one project, thus eliminating a seam, which can become a problem with frost heaves and water getting in there and the like. So that's why it's been delayed.
Is that a DPW, the DPW is doing that work?
The plan is not to have DPW do this. This is going to be contracted out. They've looked at DPW and looked at a private contractor, and the private contractor actually would be a little bit less expensive than having it done with DPW.
So, I mean, but that's kind of what I'm driving at. So you didn't put the first portion out to bid for a private contractor, or?
DPW did the first.
Yes.
DPW provided Phase 1.
Yeah,
Phase 1.
So.
they did Phase 1.
So you'll put the, 'cause, I mean, but that's kind of what I'm driving at. So you didn't put the first portion out to bid for a private contractor, or? DPW did the first.
Yeah.
So completion of it out, and you'd obviously have a contractor on an agreement that gets a completion date, right? So that whatever
Right.
you're asking for, or whatever you're recommending, this, that
There's
hasn't been
another
completed.
$50,000 in the current request to complete, right, with that money. to
With the
complete
26,
project.
it'll be 76.
And you'll have them on a date certain for completion under a contract, if
The
you're.
plan will be to do it this summer.
Yes, okay, yeah.
And is this, this comes back to another question, is this being spearheaded by DPW or by the school department? Who's overseeing this? I know the request was school.
Yeah.
It says Wayne on the,
The school department's
Says
overseeing
Wayne,
it.
okay.
Wayne hired them.
Okay.
Mike?
The only question I have is, I appreciate all the work you guys have done with the fire department and the building. Is the money that's not spent getting tied in with the money that you're requesting as well, or is that going away? It's tied in,
It's all
okay.
tied in.
When we get into this year's project, to see what we're
These are
planning.
articles that numbers.
Thank you. Thank you for all this. This is very helpful.
Okay.
All right, it was as I mentioned in the cover memo that went with this, it was kind of an unusual process this year in that we got a couple of things that got in the way of getting early decisions. Obviously, the reorganization in DPW was a factor. We also had a late request after all the requests were in for bathroom facilities at the high school football field, and the stormwater permits. It wasn't until about 2 weeks ago that we knew that we were going to have to deal with that this year. Put that back into the budget. We had thought we could delay it a year because nothing had happened, and all of a sudden EPA announced that we needed to get moving on it, so that bumped up. The initial list we had from the departments was about a little over 30 items totaling $2.8 million. Our first review of that went through, took some things out of there because they were really repair and maintenance items. They weren't capital projects, and they went off the budget. The school department, as I mentioned, withdrew its request for the wireless infrastructure at the elementary schools, to look for some grant money to go with that and bring the project back next year. So we whittled it down to about 16 requests totaling $1.9 million. And that's what you're seeing there. We then ranked the projects individually and got a composite score on all of those projects. Looked at what our funding availability was and determined that we would need to cut it off after the DPW highway, the multifunction tractor flail mower for $30,000. Essentially $666,000 is what we could recommend within and to maintain our debt service restrictions. The turf field, sanitary facilities for the turf field, we found out only a week ago that it is possible to get a waiver on that. It was a question on that up until that point in time, whether or not that had to be included in the budget this year, or whether that could be bumped out a year and we would get a waiver so that we could continue to use the field. Through the efforts of Joe Fode and Mike, we were able to get clarification on that, and that can be delayed next year. We don't know what the project is going to cost. There's been a number of $500,000 that's been tossed around. It includes, my last understanding of it, the bathroom facilities and also a snack shack at the field. I'll speak not for the committee, but for myself. I've got a real problem with the snack shack being part of that. If we've got a mandate to do toilet facilities, We have to comply with that mandate, obviously. If we're doing something optional, I think that optional needs to fall in line with everything else that will be on next year's budget request, and we should evaluate that separately, my personal view.
Excuse me,
The other
Don?
item that we did, I'm gonna go through the ones we
Don?
Don?
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just a note with regard to the facilities at Arthur Kinney Field. So we have received a notification from the state that there is flexibility with regard to the implementation date. One thing we are still evaluating is the impact that it may or may not have with the closeout of the ongoing secondary school building project. That is a matter that's separate that we're reviewing with the building inspector. We'll be reviewing with the building inspector and the project manager. Just something that I would note at this point. So that's all. Thank you.
We're hoping that the certificate of occupancy isn't all right.
You mentioned that, would it have an impact or not have an impact on this request?
It depends at this point. It could potentially have an impact. It could potentially.
But it's also important to note that the article, warrant article that we have in for design plans is still critical as far as meeting the mandates and getting the waiver from the state to postpone, but to push out a little bit.
And it should help nailing down
What the actual plan is going to be. Right.
The importance of separating out the certificate of occupancy, obviously, is getting the high school, middle school project closed out.
I'm sorry.
Yes?
Yeah, I didn't quite understand how the, satisfying the closing of the school contract with the snack shack. I lost how
If the
that.
certificate of occupancy included the bathroom facilities on the field,
Thank you.
and that couldn't be done for a year or a year and a half, then it could slow down the closeout of the project with MWRA.
MSBA.
Wrong agency.
Same idea, though.
It's important that they be separated and the high school, middle school be on its own, so that that project can be closed out and we can get the balance of our holdback money from MSBA.
But that hasn't been finalized yet.
That has not been finalized yet, but Mike is working on that. Another item that was on the list that that did not make the cut is the expand the downtown sewer, the $225,000. This is a design and permitting fee for a project that will, by its current estimate, will cost $1.9 million. What's going to happen here, instead of going forward with this at this time, is to do a needs analysis to see what the status is of all of the septic systems that support the various buildings in the downtown area. So hooking up to the treatment plant at the high school may be a nice thing to do, but unless we have to do it because we've got failing septic systems, it probably makes more sense to bump this out. You'll see when we go through the projections going out that I put this into next year, but we may not need to spend it next year depending on where that study comes out. That's fine.
And just to dovetail with that, when we go through the FY17 operating budget with the board in the next agenda item, I believe, you'll see that there is an allocation of funding in there for that needs analysis to evaluate the existing systems at the public facilities in the town center. And it's
One question or piece of information that would be valuable to have, not necessarily for this year, but thinking forward, is how much money does the school department have to put into the treatment plant to keep it going during the summer? Do we have some kind of an estimate of that? I guess I'm directing it at you, Michael.
The budget for the school department to run the plant, which includes the 12-month operations, is about $150,000. And we anticipate, this is the first year that plant's been fully online from July 1 through June 30, and we anticipate that our expenses are going to stay within that budget. So.
No, what I was referring to is if we connected up, the town buildings, the senior housing, which was a long-range plan, would that have a positive impact by reducing that budget?
I do know that to keep the plant, fully operating, given the low flow time period in the summer, there's gonna be additional cost to, feed and seed the plant, to run the plant. So it's, possibly, I don't have all the numbers to know exactly what that would result in, but.
It would be valuable to have that information necessarily for this budget process,
Mr. Chair, I don't think it'll reduce the cost to run the plant, even if you tie in the senior housing, I don't think the budget will change what you have to spend per year. The difference is what you don't have to spend on the senior housing for pumping that out and all that. Because what they're gonna be putting in there, they're paying for that product, but what they're taking, what they're treating will still have to be treated, so that'll offset with the senior center, with the senior housing.
Okay,
You know
so
what I mean?
I was just under the impression that in the summertime, when the volume was down, that we had to feed that plant. And if we have to feed it, then there's a cost of doing it.
There is, correct, but for the 2 months, right, you're gonna feed it with what minimally you have to put in there just to make it so it doesn't, it's being used. The difference is when you tie in the senior housing, you're probably adding more than that you would have to have minimally in there. So the cost may be the same or a little bit more, but then you don't have the cost of the senior housing to pump, right?
Okay. All right. So you're saying that there's more savings in the fact that we're not doing an annual maintenance or whatever we do on the
Maybe an
septic
offset.
system. Yeah, okay.
The next three things, I'm not gonna go into any detail, they were just lower in the priority list and didn't make the cut. The tool cap, the replacement car for the fire department, and the multi-function activity bus. The fire police communication, this was a proposal for a microwave system and some infrastructure. We looked at the proposal, thought it was very costly. There's another 50,000 in the second phase of this, so it's a good $500,000 project. It wasn't clear if there were alternatives to this. We had asked the fire chief to go back and to look at some other alternatives. He came back and really didn't change the proposal very much, so I think that next year we're gonna have to push real hard to find out just what it is we have to do, because it's a big number and the benefit
My
of it wasn't
reaction
clear.
is broadband, VPN tunnels.
Well, you were on the committee when we last discussed this,
Yeah.
and it hasn't moved far from there.
Okay.
So, anyway, those are the ones we've deferred or to next year. Going back now to the top, the first one there, which got the highest ranking, of course, was the fire station rehab. We did a field trip to the fire station, and I think all of us who made that trip felt that the conditions there were just not acceptable, and we needed to do something. We did receive a report on the building of what could be done to enhance the building and to build it out some more. But it was a very big number. It was about a $5 million number, and we knew that was not in the cards. We just couldn't afford to have that kind of an undertaking. But we absolutely needed to do something to make the conditions there more livable for the firefighters. We looked at doing something in the dormitory space, the carpeting, painting walls, and incorporating in the balance of the money from last year that hasn't been spent, and figure for the 200,000 this year plus the balance from last year, we can dress the place up with kitchens, some new furniture, some new equipment, and spruce the place up. So it's a place that you wouldn't be ashamed to have somebody go look at and say, this is where we're housing our firefighters. Right now, it is in that condition. We need to do something. So that became the top priority of the committee. The next one is an annual allocation for repurchasing computer equipment for the town. The next is a enhancement of the Wi-Fi for the town buildings. There's some issues, and you can read the write-up in the book if you haven't read it, but there are some issues on connectivity that need to be addressed. The special education van in the school department, they've got 3 special ed vans. This is the one with the wheelchair access. They're on a rotating schedule of replacing one every year, and it's time for this one to be replaced. And there'll be another one next year, and we did one last year. So we keep moving this around, but this is the one and only one with the wheelchair access, and we got to make sure we've got something in working order.
Sorry to interrupt you, just try to catch you on the Wi-Fi one.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure on the math, so you get 35,000 you're gonna pay out of the 70 in cash? Is that how I'm reading that?
Oh, that could be an error, Mike.
Okay.
Oh, no, that isn't. No, that's just carrying the cash
Yeah.
down.
So, because it says you're bonding
We're bonding
70
70.
of the 70. You're
We're
gonna bond.
bonding all 70 of that.
It's cumulative down the
Carried
column,
down.
Mike.
Yes.
Oh, it's carried
It's
down.
cumulative.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Carried down.
okay,
Yep.
I got it.
So that's specific to the
This
project.
is saying cash,
Got
total
it.
cash, total cash.
The-
And
Okay.
then it adds these two together to
Yeah.
get the 80,000.
Sorry,
You know, me thinking there was a mistake.
no, that's,
I'm gonna get into what
Confused
we're
myself.
doing in terms of cash and bonding in a minute, but, DPW, there was a request in for 2 trucks, one here and one in the water enterprise. One is being done this year, we'll do the other one next year. The water conservation system, this is an important item for us to deal with in terms of our future movement to MWRA. We had to put in some water conservation elements. Some of the buildings, it's a pretty quick payback, it's a few years, 3 to 4 years. Others, it isn't so much, but it isn't a lot of dollars. I think if you take all the buildings we're doing, it's about an 8 or 9 year payback, but the larger uses are a big payback, and the smaller uses, of course, are.
What you're talking about is like faucets that are electronically controlled.
That's
moving
right.
hands away.
Yep. School department computer replacement plan, again, this is an annual replacement. This is the $60,000 for replacing Chromebooks and iPads and the like. As I mentioned earlier, their wireless infrastructure for the elementary schools has been bumped out to next year. The stormwater drain map phase 2B, the GIS data enhancement, this is one up until a week ago we didn't think we were going to have to do, and we do, and it's a big item, and it cannot be bonded. It's got to be paid for in cash. It's not a bondable acquisition. The Hood School parking lot phase 2, Captain, this is the second part I mentioned, it's the other $50,000 to complete the project. We did part of our review is to go out and take a look at vehicles or at the fire station. Last year, we went out to the Hood School and looked at the conditions of the playground and the walkways and the like around the school. And it was pretty clear that something had to be done. It was a situation that was in some places bordering on being dangerous. So we funded part of it last year, the balance of it this year, or recommended it. The DPW, the multifunction flail mower, we bought a new piece of equipment last year and had hopes that the flail mower is the arm that cuts the brush, okay? And we got a new flail mower for our old piece of equipment a year ago or a year and a half ago because it had been damaged and there was an insurance claim, and we ended up getting a new piece, and we thought we would be able to put that onto the new tractor. It doesn't fit. It just won't, it doesn't line up. The technology is different. So the old tractor that it is attached to has got a lot of maintenance issues. The plan here is to buy the new flail mower for the new machine and get rid of the old tractor and the flail mower and see what we can get for it, but to be done with it. So all of that comes to roughly $666,000. We're planning on bonding the fire station upgrades, and we're going to bond the Wi-Fi, the $70,000. The rest of it's going to be funded through cash. And in a minute, you'll see for the cash that's coming in June. We've got $150,000 coming in from free cash, $150,000 coming in from raise and appropriate. And we're recommending that we transfer for $96,000 out of the capital improvement stabilization fund in order to satisfy the needs for capital purchases and get out of the 5-year bonding business entirely after this year, with the exception of the $70,000. If you look out over the next 4 years, we're not doing any 5-year bonding. And we're doing that because what we're going to do is use the free cash and the raise and appropriate amounts. And the raise and appropriate will grow by $25,000 a year for the next couple of years. And then transfer $50,000 out to the stabilization, the capital stabilization fund, to augment the amount of money that's coming in from the other two sources, so that we can pay cash for anything that's got a useful life of 5 years.
So I take it the $70,000 for the Wi-Fi is 5 years.
It is.
Yeah.
And we would, the original plan was to pay cash for that until we found out we had a $105,000 obligation for the stormwater.
Yeah.
And then we couldn't do it.
And why can't you bond the stormwater?
I'll let Liz answer that one.
You cannot bond the stormwater as it is permitting and different studies, so it doesn't qualify.
But did we not bond the DEIR? Or are we paying cash for that? I don't recall.
I think that the issue is that the environmental impact report, draft and final, result in a construction project that is bondable. In the case of this is a mapping project, essentially, mapping the locations.
So going forward, this is the capital improvement plan. In 2018, in the 20-year item, there are 3 major pieces in that. There's a $525,000 for new fire engine, which is pretty sure we're going to have to do that. There's $500,000 in there for the facility at the high school for bathrooms / snack shack / whatever. And there's $225,000 for the design and permitting for the expanding the downtown sewer to the high school. We need to do the fire engine. We really don't know at this point what the cost is and what the scope of the work is for the bathroom facilities and the snack shack, and where that will shake out in the evaluation. But I wanted to put it in here so that we wouldn't lose sight of the fact that that may be an obligation. We need to be prepared to deal with it in looking at the debt service. On the third item, the $225,000 for the design and permitting for expanding the downtown sewer to the high school treatment plant, hooking up the downtown buildings. Depending upon what comes out of the needs assessment, we may or may not need to do that next year. We may not need to do that for some time to come. Depends upon the condition of the each of the septic systems. Some of them aren't that old. The $300,000 that's in there, not earmarked for anything but the school's Wi-Fi project is probably going to be in around that range. So that would leave us a little more than what we've got up in the 5 years, the 5-year stuff in cash. To the extent we don't need the $1,250,000 in its entirety, then we've got some room to move things around. In 2019, the $850,000 includes another fire engine for $500,000 that is on the horizon, and we popped that in here just so that, again, we don't lose track of it. So what we're looking at here is that we'll be able to do, $375,000 to $450,000 a year in 5-year purchase, which is a decent number. I think we can take care of a lot of things for that. And in this case, we're looking at $1.5 million, $1.3 million, and then it drops off. Of course, the further out these numbers go, the less dependable they are. But we've got some ability. If we had to do that bonding, we could do that bonding and still stay within the cap, which is the $1.1 million debt service, plus the debt service on the little school roof. The other item that's in here is Chapter 90. That is the $510,000 is our award for this year, and I've just held that flat for the out years. As Mike mentioned earlier, we don't have any request in for road money coming out of the capital budget this year. And the reason for that was that we thought they would be hard pressed to get the work done on the $510,000. But we will clearly see something coming up next year.
Michael?
Yeah. For you. In regards to vehicles, when you go through the CIP process, do you guys get a sort of an overview or an audit on all the vehicles we have? So, like we're buying another pickup truck or buying another fire truck, in what's coming off? Do you ever look at what's coming out of?
We do.
Okay.
Because
it just seems like we're getting more vehicles than less people, and I was just curious.
No. The vehicles that we're looking at are replacing vehicles. So one's coming off, one's going away. Last year, we had 2 go away and 1 come on in DPW. The big truck, we got rid of two other trucks. So there is a look at what the fleet looks like.
Okay.
So it's not just adding, because you've got insurance and maintenance, and just to hang on to this stuff doesn't make any sense. What we try to do as well is see what we can get for a trade-in. Usually there's not a big number because we tend to keep these vehicles a long time. The car number 4, I think it was, for the fire department, I can't imagine that's got much value at all. It's an old Crown Vic, I think, that isn't used all that much, and delaying it out another year was okay. But if we replace that, then that will go away, and cars will get bumped around a little bit. The chief's car would move to the service that this is being held for, and but we would have no net change in the number of vehicles.
And my last question has to do with the conversation we touched upon earlier, is if we can't get the building inspector to approve the project down at the turf field, and what impact it could potentially have here, do you guys have a sort of a pecking list of what would go away?
Approve the project means...
I guess maybe I misunderstood.
You're talking about the certificate of occupancy?
Yep.
He's the boss. I just get up and talk all over.
Yeah, I think the issue is more how we coordinate with MSBA. I think it's really less the building inspector and more what is the closeout process with the MSBA and what are they going to expect to see from us to be able to resolve it. I think that the building inspector, to the extent that he can, given that the approval was given by a state agency, is trying to work with us and to facilitate that process. But I think that the undetermined factor is how we close out with MSBA, more than anything.
Mr. Chairman, just in addition to that, the timing of it may still be fine. You know, we're going to go to the design stage soon, you know, whatever the project's going to be. And the funding source, even if it's in the next fiscal year, by the time close out with MSBA, it may coordinate, may dovetail fairly well.
Thank you.
The one comment I have regarding the fire engines is to see two of them back to back. It seems to me that maybe that's the case, but we ought to find a way of,
Yeah.
where we end up spending, substantial amount of money as a custom vehicle. Shouldn't have to buy one year and replace the second one the second year. I mean, maybe we're in that box at this point.
I'll let you speak, because I think it's coming up on 25 years for the second engine.
That's correct, yes. So engine 2 will be 25 years old in 2 years. We expect that request to come in a year in advance because of the lead time with ordering and building the truck. Right behind that is engine 3, 1 year behind that, engine 3. And we do have a bit of a reprieve, which is engine 4 in 15 years from now, but the ladder is right behind it. Ladder right in front of it in 14 years from now. So we're going to face this issue of kind of back-to-back major purchases at that same time. Again, useful bonding, a useful life and a bonding period that we can extend based on the useful life of the equipment, but it is an issue. They are back-to-back, and we will see another back-to-back situation in 14 years or so.
Somebody will.
Bob will be reporting it. Bob?
Yes, Jim.
Kate? I think
And
what's-
I noticed that the same thing for the special education van too, that one of them is on your completed list that was just purchased, but yet there's another one in this.
There are 3 active vehicles, and they will rotate one behind the other. I think they're 2005.
Right, so there's a 2005, 2006, 2007. We replaced the oldest vehicle last year, and we're continuing with this replacement plan to get the oldest vehicles replaced that are approaching the end of its useful life beyond 10 years with over 120,000 miles.
So that's why it's
Yeah,
like
I mean,
back to back.
if we could buy a year, but I think the risk in trying to do that, particularly with this vehicle, where it is the only wheelchair accessible vehicle in the fleet, it's too much of a gamble. If we had to go out and do something in a hurry, it would probably be more costly, or if we had to contract it out, we wish we hadn't done that. So we're in the cycle we were in.
I think that's the result of the school department deciding some time ago that it was cheaper for us to provide the special ed transportation than to use an outside service.
Slide it over a little bit so we can see.
And therefore, the vehicles must have been bought 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
As
A little
they
bit top of
expanded
the
that
program.
program.
Thank you.
So we'll see one more next year too, then. We'll see one more up for replacement.
I can't hear you.
We'll see one more up
Next
for
year.
replacement next year.
Yes, and then we won't see them for a while,
10 more
and then
years.
we'll see it all together again.
Mm.
Unless in some way we can alter the lives and stretch it a little bit.
Or at least take some of the other capitals that occur in those kinds of cycles and stagger them so
Yeah.
that they don't all come together at once.
Let me just quickly go through the debt service, okay? And I'm not gonna bore you with all the numbers on it, because it will make you crazy, but we do look at the impact of what we're bonding and the length of time that it's being bonded for. On the very top line up there is the debt service without the little school roof that is on the books right now. Okay, these are things that have already been bonded, and we're paying debt service on it. The estimate on the little school roof will add the $88,000 in 17 and then going forward, which gives us a pre-2017 debt service. Last year, we looked at the list of items that were approved last year. I don't believe any of it's been bonded yet, Liz, is that true?
That's correct.
Okay, but we wanted to recognize the fact that we're gonna have to pay it. We said we're gonna do it. Many of them are completed, and hopefully the rest of them are done this year. So when that happens, there is going to be some debt service associated with those acquisitions. It'll slide out a bit, but for purposes of looking at what we've committed to, we're showing it on here in the current year. And so as to not go spend it again on acquisitions this year and bust that cap. So what we saw on the previous sheet were the amounts that we were looking at in terms of the $1,200,000 in fiscal 18 and for the fire engine and the bathroom facilities and the expansion of the sewer district. Those are all now brought into this table. If we go down to the bottom of it, Mike, we've got on this row, this is our target. Okay, this is what our self-imposed restriction is, that we've got a debt service of $1.1 million, and then we modified that to add the little school rule. It said that wasn't in the plan, it's going to be paid, it's being paid out of the operating budget. So our cap on debt service is $1,186,000. This is the Capital Improvement Stabilization Fund. We started with $977,000. This year we'll take in free cash and raise and appropriate. They're going back out again to fund the debt, to fund the acquisitions. We're looking at another $200,000 from free cash in October. We're transferring, and this $95,000 we saw on the previous slide, to put it into the fund so we can pay for 5-year acquisitions. And then this is the part that gets us into a truly stabilization, is that we need to deduct from the debt service $117,000. We would have been over our debt service cap by $117,000, given what's here, if we didn't do anything. But we're holding it at the cap, so we need to take $117,000 out of the capital fund and essentially bring it into the operating fund to pay for the debt service. We'll need to do that next year and the year after as well. And if we go out to the 4th year out, you can see that the annual debt service is $1,125,000 against the cap of $1,182,000, so we're okay there. As I said, the out-year numbers aren't as firm, obviously, as the most current numbers. So when we're looking 3 years from now, that may not be the case. Okay, it depends on what happens in between. But we've got a program here that we've got a fairly sizable fund. We're starting off at almost $950,000. We'll end about flat this year. We'll end about $964,000, but that will grow to, under this scenario, $1,135,000, a little bit more. It gets up towards about $1.5 million in the final year of this. Undoubtedly, some things are going to come up. We're going to have to do. We can use this fund. That's why it's good that we've got this fund and we've been able to build it, because it allows us the flexibility to do things that we need to do without raising or taking additional funds out of the operating budget that we just can't afford to do. So that's what the debt service and the capital fund look like.
Thank you, Don, that's very good.
All right, question, no other questions?
So the recommendations of the capital plan are what you went over a few minutes ago.
That plus from out of the exempt debt, yes. There is another
We
recommendation
didn't talk about the water.
for water, but we're recommending 600 and, a little spec more, Mike, yeah, 665, 779 in capital expenditures with 270,000 of that bonded and the rest to be paid in cash.
What do you? Yeah. Any, Michael?
I just want to thank the entire Capital Improvement Committee. I know you guys met a bunch of times, put a tremendous amount of effort into this. So I know we're going through it in an hour or so, but I know you guys got multiple hours into it, so thank you for all your time. And Joe, special thank you for all the effort you did helping us get that waiver. That definitely takes a little bit of the pressure off. I know the responsibility doesn't go away, but certainly having that, a little bit of pressure off us will help us get through this year and maybe even next year.
Okay. Mr. Gilberto, do you have any comments? Since it's your capital plan, basically.
I just would thank the members of the committee for their efforts, and in particular, Don for his time putting together the financing plan and the long-term plan for projecting out what other liabilities are coming on the horizon. So Don, thank you for your efforts, and thank you to the Vice Chairman, the Finance Director, Liz, for her efforts as well, for doing the heavy lifting. But again, thank you to everybody. I think that what you see here is a capital improvement plan that reflects the broad base of needs and the town's ability to pay within the tax levy, and that we've tried to project out knowing what other liabilities are out there and to act accordingly with this plan. So I think that reasonably, that you always risk that the unforeseen that could occur, but we've tried to factor in what our needs are going to be over the next few years and to come up with a plan that reflects those needs coming on the horizon.
In addition to all the kudos that went over the entire committee, I want to thank Steve and Jeff for their efforts as board members on the committee. And I think that, having served on the committee, I know the work and that's involved, but also it gives you an opportunity to look at things generally that we don't look at clearly, and maybe as we go forward, regardless of who the chairman is, they might think about rotating the assignments to the capital improvement program. That might be proved to be valuable to everybody, all board members.
Yep.
So with that, I believe you have a motion.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend the fiscal year 2017 capital expenditures as follows. This will be by project department cost and source of funds. Fire station miscellaneous interior upgrades, it's town buildings, $200,000. Source is bond. Computer equipment replacement plan, IT department, $35,000, free cash. Wi-Fi upgrade, IT department, $70,000, bond. Special education van, school department, $45,000, raise and appropriate. Replace 3/4-ton pickup truck number 10, DPW highway department, $45,500, raise and appropriate. Town buildings, install water conservation devices, town building department, $25,279, free cash. Drain, computer replacement plan, school department, $60,000, raise and appropriate. Drain map phase 2B GIS data enhance, stormwater, $105,000, free cash. Hood School parking lot paving phase 2, school department, $50,000, free cash. Multifunction tractor flail mower, DPW highway, $30,000, free cash. And Reading water system improvements, design permit build, Water and MWRA, $100,000 bond. North Reading System Improvements, design permit bid. Water, MWRA, $175,000 bond. Pump station, site screening, design permit bid. Water, MWRA, $100,000 bond. Pump station land acquisition, water, MWRA, $750,000 bond. Water distribution system upgrades, water, MWRA, $150,000 bond. Chlorine residual evaluation, phase 1 and 2, water, $150,000, water infrastructure stabilization fund.
Second.
Discussion, further discussion. This point, Jeff.
Could she have not read this as presented? Is it required that she had to read every single thing? Could she have just, as presented?
Well, probably we could have bypassed that.
Let the evenings, yeah.
We didn't spend a lot of time talking about the water, so I think it's just as well
Right.
that it be read.
Okay.
So on the motion,
I'm a fast reader, and the
all in favor?
citizens need to know
Aye.
about it.
Opposed? Unanimous. Let's move on. We have still a number of items on our agenda. So,
Oh.
Yeah, but
are we done with this? Okay, I'm not gonna turn it on.
That mean we don't have.
Okay,
Wow, I
review the
Wednesday is
FY
that
2017
I'll miss that.
revenue and expenditure budget. And is that Liz presenting that, or at this point, or are you, Michael?
I'll be presenting it. Just be one moment,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, though.
Maybe we'll take just a 2-minute recess, Mr. Chairman.
It's a power bar.
2-minute recess?
Mr. Chairman, maybe we just take a 2-minute recess?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Bob,
Yes,
2-minute recess.
Just a 2-minute recess.
2-minute recess.
Power bar, Steve,
What's that?
to keep it, they're
I don't need a
healthy.
power bar. I'm
They're
good.
protein bars.
What team are they? Is it a professional team?
I took them out of the snacks cabinet. They're good. Chip, power bar there. Thank you.
This is my capital, this is my,
Dinner.
This morning,
this is my CIP.
Unbelievable, huh?
There's 2 minutes.
One of the 2 on each side. All right, so we've got minutes of April 13th. Discussion, hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Move to approve April 20th. Second. Discussion?
Is this a meeting
Hearing none.
going?
All in favor?
You got
It
a
is.
meeting?
Very efficient. Conduct business in any place.
Finish it up.
Do the minutes for that, or next week?
Yeah. If I can have a plan, I'll sign these. And I'll give them to you.
Yeah, no.
This one is
Okay, so I need to know. I was thinking about it. Yeah. Just the whole committee. So 4, 6, and 4, no, 13, and 20.
Because it could be never ending.
I'm trying to finish.
We called for anything special?
We're doing the budget and the warrant.
You had a soccer practice tonight.
Improvements, yeah.
I think it was last
presentation. I recorded you as abstaining.
Yes.
For the minutes. Yeah, yeah. I understand that.
I think so.
Why don't we just approve now? and
Yes,
just-
team.
okay.
Thank you. First group,
So Catherine, where'd you go?
That's fine, yeah. I think we'll schedule another meeting after.
talking to Catherine, and I didn't realize she was on the phone. We're gonna hold off on the next meeting.
All the more good.
No. Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
Michael?
So we're just finishing one item relative to the revenue and expenditure presentation and the budget reconciliation. So I ask if we can pass over that agenda item for now and go into the discussion of the town meeting warrant articles. So for the members, if you are in your in the Dropbox folder for this evening's meeting, 4/25/2016, there is a document that is dated June 2016 warrant 4/25/16. And that is the most updated draft of the town meeting warrant. And my suggestion is, because we have a couple of things that we're still trying to tie out relative to the water projects and the MWRA project, that we actually, if the board would be amenable, hold off on the recommendations for the articles this evening, but instead perhaps go through the articles for discussion purposes to see if there's any areas where we need clarification or where there's a question
missing.
or, you know, or if there's anything that we'd like to see added. And again, the board will be asked to sign the warrant on Monday, May 9th. And whatever recommendations are available at the end of that meeting, we will certainly put into the warrant as well.
Okay.
So.
You're going to take the lead? or
Yeah,
you-
I'm happy to go through. The first
Okay.
one is Article 1, budget amendment. We still are evaluating whether there'll be any needs for any amendments to the FY16 budget. If there are, we'll bring them up. They may be available to us but prior to May 9th, or they may not be available till afterwards. But we'll continue to evaluate that as we close out the year.
That's a placeholder then, basically.
Correct. Article 2, FY 2016 snow and ice deficit. So at this point, when you include all of the encumbrances, we have exceeded the available appropriation, as well as the $250,000 buffer that we carry. Thank you, Liz. So we are showing it that $250,000 carryover, we are at approximately $299,999.90. That would be over by about $49,000. However, over 80,000 of that is in open and unexpended purchase orders, so we're working with DPW to reconcile it, which may bring it back down below that $250,000 number. So I don't think we have any reason to be immediately concerned, because, well, I believe, we hope, Mother Nature's cooperating, and we've limited the exposure at this point.
If we had to put the money in, it would come out of free cash, and would we have free cash to do that?
We'd have to evaluate funding sources to address it, but I believe we'd be able to find a funding source to cover that. Transfer into the capital improvement stabilization fund, that's $370,000 in free cash factored.
That is accounted for.
Correct.
Just a correction, it's 320.
320, oh, sorry. Okay. Thank you, Liz. Article 4, FY 2016 transfer funds to water stabilization fund. We finalize that number as we get closer to town meeting, and we're evaluating the expenses associated with the solid waste program. We're projecting it at just about $55,000 right now, but the final number is to be determined. Appropriation.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Thinking of the snow and ice. Have we heard anything on the FEMA money?
Yes, so we are nearly complete with our reconciliation with FEMA on the portion that was relative to the town buildings. There are some items that we had submitted that we will be able to obtain reimbursement for. There are other items that they will not be reimbursing us for. Fortunately, the reimbursement is limited to, in many cases, the insurance premium, the deductible for the repairs that were done. So our risk is fairly low for the projects. But we're closing out with FEMA, and I know that Liz was corresponding with them as recently as today.
Do we expect to see that money before the end of the fiscal year?
Yeah, that I think would be unlikely.
Unlikely,
Yeah.
okay.
What is the insurance deductible?
$5,000 for buildings.
Yeah, but there's also money associated with that one storm that was declared an emergency, right?
Oh.
Correct?
I'm sorry? Mr. Chairman,
There's also money coming, supposedly coming to us for the one storm that was covered, called an emergency.
that's correct,
State
yes.
emergency.
So this is all from the same event.
Mm-hmm.
Two categories. One was for what I'll call kind of road and snow removal operations.
Mhm.
The other was damage to public buildings. And
Okay.
the first component we've been approved for. The second component, we're still working with FEMA.
But we
on.
haven't seen any of the money.
No. And I just need to correct myself. I had mentioned that the Article 4 was the solid waste stabilization fund, but it's the water stabilization fund. I apologize for the error.
You said that projected 55,
You were being polite.
and the project number was still 55,000 for that one?
Correct, for the water stabilization fund. Article 5, appropriate money to the stabilization fund. I'm not anticipating a recommended deposit into the fund at this point, but we'll carry it as a placeholder article nonetheless. Article 6, 7, 8, and 9 are routine articles. I won't go into any detail with regard to those. Article 10, Chapter 90 funding, we're projecting $510,258 based on notice from the state. Article 11, we have one prior year bill at this point that we're projecting. It's $25 and relative to employee benefits. Article 12 is the naming of the Carter at North Reading Middle and High School for Charles Jones. And we've moved the location of that article based on the board's feedback to, from the end of the warrant to Article 12, just prior to the articles associated with the operating capital budget. Article 13 would be rescinding an authorization to borrow for water vehicles from 2012 in the amount of $10,761. And for the ambulance, which we had authorization to borrow, but ended up being able to purchase using cash on hand from the ambulance fund. That's from last year's town meeting.
How much was it again?
Approximately $292,000 from the June 1st, 2015 town
So
meeting.
that's Article 13.
Correct. That's Article 13, correct.
I lost you. I thought you said $10,761.
That's for water vehicles being rescinded from the year 2012.
Okay.
So
And then the
it's a
ambulance.
rescind article for more than one article.
Correct, for one article, two items, water vehicle and an ambulance.
Okay, thank you.
Appropriation of free cash for bond appropriation in Article 4. We're carrying that at $1,169.25, which is essentially to replenish a capital account. And the funding source, I believe, is going to be free cash for that, Liz?
This is funds left over from,
No, so this happens to be funds that were closed out from a bond issuance for the middle school modulars.
yeah,
And we are in the process right now of an IRS audit, and you are not allowed to close out bond proceeds over $1,000. And this was closed out years ago, back in 2006 or 7. And so we need to reappropriate the bond proceeds
And do what with it?
and appropriate them to a like project.
Fire station.
So you'll see.
who made that rule?
Who made what rule?
It seems we've already rescinded no, we haven't transferred money from
No.
that?
The money was closed out
Yeah.
to fund balance, which then turns into free cash.
Yeah.
And you cannot close out bond proceeds. As you see later on, we're reappropriating bond proceeds that we borrowed for another like project. You have to reappropriate the bond proceeds.
Oh,
for
you
a
couldn't
like-
turn it into free, okay, I got it, all right, sorry. I misunderstood what. Yeah.
Moving to Article 15, a similar reappropriation for water bond proceeds from 2014 water distribution system upgrades. $77,568 is the article, and you'll see Both of these reappropriations will appear in Article 17 relative to the capital plan, and I'll speak to that in just a moment.
Okay, so we're reappropriating them into,
That's correct. It's similar to what we did in June of
Okay, yep.
2015. Article 16 will be the omnibus operating budget, which I'll speak further to at the next agenda item. Article 17 is the capital expenditure plan.
as we approved it this evening?
Yes, although I'm going to note one caveat. What we are looking at doing is taking the MWRA-related projects in Article 17 and placing them into a consolidated Article 20, which would include funding for planning, design, and land acquisition for the MWRA, as well as the authority to for the board to file the OP10 application to the MWRA to become a member and file the special legislation. So what we're considering, kind of looking for some feedback from the board, is putting all of that MWRA-related action into a single warrant article, where, including the financial actions. In the past, when we've done these appropriations related to the MWRA project, we've put them in the capital project. But where there are a number of them, and they are significant in amount, the thought would be to consolidate them all into one article to address all of the MWRA needs.
Well, I think from the water project, we ought to always keep it in a separate capital article.
So
The fact that you have included the joining the MWRA in as one article, I guess I don't have a problem with, but I think going forward, we should have a capital for general town needs and then capital for water, so that it's clearly visible what we're doing.
Yep.
And of course, the funds are coming out of whatever the board decides in the near future as to the funding of these sources, of these items.
And just as far as the required votes on these bond authorizations are
Two-thirds.
two-thirds. As far as authorization to have a sign off and join the MWRA?
I believe that's a simple
Simple majority.
Then I would separate the two.
That's where I was just going.
Maybe we should have two articles there then.
So
Yeah, we do.
we'll keep them separated as they are proposed in the draft then, rather than consolidate as I proposed. And we'll just put the funding items into Article 20, as is presented right now.
Okay.
And again, then that gives us an opportunity, depending upon how the first vote goes, for capital projects, which require bonding two-thirds, we still have a majority of town meeting to authorize the joining, to reconsider at the same session, come back at it.
Okay.
And again, we may want to move the numbering of those articles.
I worked with Michael to,
I'm just thinking, you get the authorization to join first, which is gonna impact the capital expenditures on the following article.
yeah,
Okay?
well, that would make sense, right?
That's all,
Yeah.
that's all, yeah.
I mean,
So
no
Article
sense
21 before
asking
20.
for the
21 before.
capital.
So, again,
Do it early.
so the planning design, so what, 20 before capital?
So 21 and 21, then 20, and do them both before 16, if I hear it correctly.
Okay, that's
Before
fine.
16 or before?
I'm sorry, 17.
Before 17.
Before 17.
Right. That make sense to you?
Does.
You get that, Michael?
I do, yes.
Okay. Then we've got fund retirement obligations.
That's estimated at $166,000 in the revenue plan, carried as raise and appropriate. Article 19, the solid waste stabilization fund,
Yeah.
number to be
We don't know what
determined.
that number is yet.
Correct. We've spoken to 20 and 21, which we will reverse and put before the capital plan. 22, appropriation of money for special counsel legal expenses. Again, I will note that the intention would be, in addition to any funding that we place in addition to existing appropriations, we would reappropriate those existing appropriations into this article, so they'd be available on an ongoing basis rather than limited to the FY16 budget.
So do we have a number for this yet?
I have an approximate number, but we'd need to confirm that with the attorney.
And do we have a funding source for it?
We've been holding a funding source for it. Well, whether it's sufficient or not will remain to be seen. Perhaps we should speak before the next meeting.
We should schedule some time for that discussion. Fund and repair town buildings, we've got that.
This would be the $50,000. Remains to be seen whether we're going to proceed now or in October for this, but we did want to keep it on there.
Transfer funds to other post-employment benefits.
It's $250,000.
Bringing that up to $250.
Yep, and raise and appropriate.
Steve?
Oh, it's good.
And that, yeah, raise and appropriate funds for a design of facilities at Arthur J. Kenny Field.
It's
Do we have
$50,000.
an estimate of what we're gonna spend there?
We're holding an estimate of $50,000 at this point,
Coming out of
free cash.
free cash. Article 26.
So we're carrying that at $40,000 from free cash. We have a grant opportunity that we've gotten preliminary indications we'll receive that would reduce that by $15,000. We'll continue to monitor the status of that grant.
Okay.
And then we have Articles 27 through 35, which are the reauthorization of a variety of revolving accounts. Article 36, which we will change the font on, indicates that it would allow the town to accept a provision for the use of basically bond funds associated with subdivisions that are not complete.
Are there any, is this a general article or?
This is a general article, but there is a very specific project that it will be applied
Okay.
towards that has already occurred. But it would
And
be a general
lastly, the
authorization.
citizens petition.
That's correct, and we have sent a letter to the petitioner informing them that the article is on there and asking if there's any information that they would like to share with the board in advance of consideration. We'll notify them the date and time of the hearing.
Has town council looked at this?
Yes.
And
And
it's illegal?
I think that there are legal concerns, to say it
But
mildly.
it's not something he would rule illegal at town meeting?
The Attorney General is going to rule.
I think the Attorney General is
illegal,
gonna
so-
gonna flag it.
I think town council's opinion would be that it would probably not pass muster with the Attorney General's office.
Yeah.
Okay.
Various Massachusetts statutes, 268A being one.
Michael?
I think, was it last year that town clerk had put out some requested times that presentations be submitted to her office in advance of town meeting? And
Oh, the deadline for
yes,
the
so
presentation.
just make sure this individual has that information, so if he's planning or she's planning to give a presentation, she needs to meet those timelines.
So when we notify him of the hearing being scheduled on the 23rd, we'll let him know.
I don't think, we didn't adopt that also.
No, we did.
No, we did not.
I wasn't in agreement with them, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure what actually happened. But,
Yeah.
out of respect to her, I don't want to upset that apple cart, but you're right, we didn't
Yeah,
adopt
we
it.
said no.
All right, and we will not be voting on
Bless you.
the town articles this evening. We're going to do that on meeting.
And then-
I think we're pretty much in favor of everything but the last one. Pretty much.
So that gets us back to the budget. We skipped over that.
Yes.
Or the revenue plan, I should say.
Mike. Just so I know, he's offering to pay speakers at our town meeting.
What's that?
Steve.
We don't have this.
Which was that?
You're gonna speak on behalf of.
Oh, sure.
Then you'll be in trouble with 268A.
Oh, when I want my ticket, they'll take care of me.
Oh, right. Right. It's cheaper to pay the ticket and not sponsor it.
I could be convinced, I stand up in favor.
Oh, no.
I'd say good work, but I want to take a look first.
Well, the Attorney General has to approve any of our adopted bylaws anyway.
So, Mr. Chairman, we have a brief presentation this evening with regard to the FY 2017 operating budget. You have in your packets the revenue and expenditure plan. It remains unchanged from the last presentation that we made in terms of the FY 2017 available revenue. However, we did update the projections for fiscal year 18 and 19 as part of an ongoing review for presentation to the financial planning team, the next meeting of which is Wednesday morning. So just very quickly, the FY 2017 revenue plan. There aren't any significant changes that I'm going to note. I'll just kind of point your attention to the bottom line there with the available general government number of $14,586,643. So, key budget adjustments. If I could ask, these are intended to reflect the February 12th budget that was forwarded to the board for review in advance of the first budget hearing, as amended by the Thursday, April 14th DPW budget hearing. And when you take those two documents into effect, which is what's pending before the board at this point in time, we've proposed the following adjustments to come into balance to that available revenue number of $14.586 million. First, the reduction of the CPC professional services into the warrant article that I described in the amount of $40,000. Now, based on the market, an increase here to the personal services budget for information technology. That's for the currently vacant GIS coordinator position. We hope that we'll be able to compete better in the market to obtain and identify and attract qualified candidates.
Excuse me, Michael, and the CPC professional service, which warrant article is it going to?
It's 26, I believe.
Was it a revolving fund?
No, it was appropriate studies for planning, appropriate funds for planning studies for housing and transportation. So we're carrying at $40,000. It's a single article with each of the studies in it. We're forecasting right now the potential grant of $15,000, which may reduce that number.
It's pretty good.
And that funding's coming out of free cash.
Yes,
With, less the grant.
correct.
Excuse me, so this $40,000 is what we had appropriated last year?
This $40,000 was a request that was not recurring in nature in the CPC budget that we're proposing that we would reduce out of that budget and put into that warrant article.
Okay. And they're aware of it and fine with it?
The CPC?
Yes.
We've been coordinating with the planner in terms of putting this in an article. I'm not aware of any opposition.
Okay.
They're one-time in nature.
This is,
Right, I just want to make sure that the CPC was on board with it.
Well, she presented it in her budget to us during the budget hearing.
But she had it built into her budget, though, and I think the
Right.
question is we've taken it out of the budget and put it
Oh, yeah.
into
No, she's
an article. I know she's worked with us to combine the articles. I mean, I can't speak to her interaction with the CPC, but
Okay.
I know the planner is aware.
They're all aware.
I spoke to the GIS position, which is this line here. Accounting, purchase of services, this is an increase in the amount of $5,402, and this is related to a request for education reimbursement on the part of the finance director for an MMA and Suffolk University-sponsored leadership certificate program for next academic year, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? 2016, 2017. This is something that was identified after the budget was finalized, but it is something that I would support the finance director attending. Excuse me. And I know that she is agreeable to the terms that we've discussed with the youth services director as well with regard to education reimbursement. Elder services miscellaneous capital. This is a reduction for the purchase of the radio for the new senior center van. Was there a corresponding increase, or we accounting for it in the fuel budget, the fuel and motor vehicles budget?
It was accounted for in the fuel budget, which was
Oh, we
updated
increased.
and given out on April 14th.
Right. So when we modified the DPW budget on April 14th, we modified the fuel and motor vehicle appropriation to include this item, but we've reduced it out of the elder services line. After consultation with the Youth Services Director, this would increase the purchase of supplies for the Youth Services Office in the amount of $300. There was some feedback with regard to stormwater from the Capital Improvement Planning Committee, that the work that we're looking to do, this $45,000, is a recurring maintenance expense. So we have built it into the DPW operating budget. I would note, Liz, I believe that number was $30,000 last year, if I remember correctly. Do I have that right?
Yes. So this is a total of 30 plus 45.
And it was the amount requested by DPW in the capital budget, correct?
Yes. 30,000.
They had 30 in the...
The capital, he requested 30,000 to the capital. However, we said that wasn't capital in nature, so we added it to the stormwater division of DPW, and it was budgeted at 30,000 for FY16, and this is an addition to the level funding of the 30,000.
Okay.
Total of 75,000.
Town buildings, DPW, this is the review of the on-site or near-site septic systems in the town center, as opposed to the $225,000 effort to design a whole system. This is a further study of the existing systems for their useful life. And we note reductions with regard to the Department of Public Works for $107,408 for personal services, and DPW purchased supplies and services in the amount of $54,900, with an increase to the, and I need to further explain this with Liz, to the salary pool of $22,769. Would you just be able to give us a little bit of detail on these three items here?
Sure. So the DPW personal services, the 107,408, consists of the step one, all the vacant positions being brought down to step one in the union contract, as well as an adjustment to the overtime budget for the current staffing level and number of hours that we project are necessary with the new average overtime rate. And also the DPW purchase service slash supplies represents, and it was given out on April 14th, there was several adjustments to different expense line items within DPW, and they totaled $54,900. You know, in a sense, I guess we could have net the two above DPW increases against the 54, but we were just showing all the ins and outs. And then the salary pool adjustment is for two potential salary adjustments that are necessary.
I have a couple. I just have a couple on these particular things. I don't know if you're gonna get into more details on some of the other budgets, but in terms of, if I just go down your list here, your youth services, there was a proposal for payment, the tuition that was incorporated into that budget. Did you leave that in?
Yes.
Okay. So we had talked at the meeting about, before adopting anything like that, implementation of a policy for tuition reimbursement. It looks like there's a proposal for 100% tuition reimbursement for the course of this year and next for the full cost of that master's degree program. And we had talked about, prior to doing that or prior to reimbursement, we need a policy in place. You don't think there's a need to take that out of the budget or reduce the budget? And because you said there's also an independent fund available for tuition reimbursement, I thought. There isn't.
We don't have an independent fund available for it. It's generally been handled on a department by department, and in this case, case by case basis. I can tell you that I expect that we will have a policy in place. I can tell you that I believe that this individual is agreeable to what I expect that policy would include in terms of the performance requirements for it. I think that the biggest question will be, moving forward prospectively, what will be the funding, will there be a funding limitation? Will we have a cap, for example, on what's available town-wide? That is something I see happening. It's something I believe happens in the school department. But in all candor, I just don't see there being a policy in place prior to town meeting. And at that point, the opportunity to appropriate the funds will have passed. The reason it even appeared in front of the board and the finance committee was because the individual was agreeable to what I thought the terms would be of an improved policy once it's finalized. And that's why it was submitted.
Then I had, okay, so that's obviously something the board discusses in terms of what we approve or what we're recommending.
For the policy? Yes,
Yeah.
you'd be asked to approve the policy.
We have gone through, are you talking about specifically the tuition, or are you talking about the whole budget?
No, I have other questions on the whole budget, definitely, but I was just in reference to this one particular item. I don't know why I thought maybe that would be an adjustment made here, but.
I see what Michael is presenting here is adjustments to what we previously reviewed to get a balanced budget.
Okay.
So the other item was already in. That doesn't mean we can't discuss it. It
Yes.
just means that
Right.
what he's presenting here tonight is how he gets to the bottom line available funds.
All right, then I guess I'll save my discussion for the board then when we get to discussing it, instead of disrupting your presentation.
Well, it's a good time to do it, because
Yeah, I have
can
no
add-
problem with
we-
you doing it, I just,
these are key budget
I think
adjustments.
now's
these are
the
the
time.
adjustments
Now.
he's
Now's
proposing
the
to
time.
get to a balanced budget.
I also, in terms of, we had the original DPW budget, then we had the proposed budget that you and the interim director prepared. And I know that there was what you would wanted to do was draw out of the personal services. But I think in terms of reviewing this, the purchase services, which I'm assuming are vendor contracts, I would like to see an itemization of those contractors that are utilized and contracts in place, and how much each vendor has been paid through those funds. Those come out of that, right? The DPW services line items, right? Where they're paying vendors.
It depends on the matter. If it's a capital project, there may be a capital appropriation that it's being expended against. For example, for water main repairs, there's a water main replacement program, which we do in advance of our paving program. That would be a capital appropriation.
Okay.
I can speak a little bit to the reduction. I'm thinking particularly for Selectman O'Leary, who I'm not sure whether you've had the opportunity to look at the documentation or not, but
Well, I was, if you don't mind me
Yeah. I don't mind at all.
interrupting you again.
No.
I was zoned in on specific purchase services, like the snow and ice line item, which has an appropriation and then an actual expend. And in the budgets that were provided, it's FY 15, 16, and the proposed for 17. And I was looking to see sort of a historical breakdown of that for those line items, for what they are purchasing outside of what the department is performing for work.
Okay.
So any kind of contracted work,
Mhm.
outside vendors, outside consultants that the department is using. How much is each vendor, on a contract for what period of time? That type of a breakdown.
For the
to
snow and
see.
ice appropriation?
Well, no, I mean, for anything that they have in contract that they're utilizing the purchase services line items to pay for. I wasn't necessarily zoning in on capital improvements,
Okay.
but maybe there's a way, if it's all lumped into that one specific.
Actually, it's broken into two pieces, because the professional services are, contracted services for DPW fall into the category of dealing with day-to-day stuff that if they get involved, you know, for example, they call in a contract to help with the water main break or something like that, or they're hiring a company to paint the lines on the street if they're not doing it, or to sweep the streets. Though the snow and ice is separate, it's a snow and ice budget, and everything that's spent for snow and ice, which include contracted services, are in that budget. It's separate from the other. So you have to look at two pieces of it if you want to get to the bottom of your
Yeah, and I mean,
question.
water main breaks aren't itemized in this. It's just a purchase services under this list of purchase services.
Yeah, if a tree falls down in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
What?
you get a
but I'm
contractor
sure
that
you
we-
have vetted emergency contractors for that, so
I
if
got
you have,
your list.
you know, your list of, you put a bid out for that, you have your list of 3, and you call in your list of 3. You already have that, even the emergency ones are vetted on an annual basis, I'm sure, by bid, right?
In some cases, yes.
Yeah,
Depending upon.
or quotes, or whatever
Mhm.
whatever the case may be for the cost.
Mhm.
So is there?
Catherine,
I think Liz can speak to the, I think
Yeah,
Liz can
she
speak
was
to it.
going like this, so, yeah.
So if I may just understand your question a little better, are you looking for a breakdown of all purchase of services / supplies for each division in DPW, not just the ones that have a reduction? Or are you just looking for the ones that have a reduction?
For all, I think, I can assume, based on the circumstances that have transpired, why there's been a shift to get some more controls in place and more checks and balances in place. So that's really what I was trying to see before we approve this. Maybe more of that needs to be shifted out the way that it's been recommended by the town administrator. That's just my thought, in terms of moving forward, changing that culture, what's the process in place now, and what needed to be changed in it. And I'm sure that there was a lot of deliberation that went into effect. But just for me, in terms of the budget review with the board, I'd like to see that sort of a breakdown. I'd like to see that itemization. Who did they have on contract? Who were they paying as outside vendors? Whether it's emergency services, and how often that vendor was called for emergency services, and so see that breakdown.
Sure, so would you like that for, FY 15 and 16, or just?
I mean, I don't want to make a lot of work for you, but it looks like it is clear that you've already deliberated on this to come up with these, in working with the town administrator. Can we see that sort of
Sure.
what we would call work product?
We can provide that, that's just a report, and then we can break it down, whether we total it by vendor or, total it by division, by vendor, we can
That'd be great.
tailor it. So, and, also I'll just refer back for the reductions of the 54,900. If you refer to the original revised change spreadsheet that was given out on April 14th, it just gives you a high level of which divisions and which items, purchase of services or purchase of supplies, were reduced. And then for the next meeting, you will have the detailed breakdown, by division, by vendor.
And can you, in your breakdown, just, when does their contract expire, and when are you going out to the next bid on those kind of services, in light of the shift in the makeup of the department presently?
Yes.
If that's part of what we're doing too, and when are we doing that?
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Wouldn't that be done on an annual basis anyway?
I don't know if it's a
Dep-
3-year contract, or if
Just
it's a,
rolling it, they've got a little bit of spending.
It depends on the contract, and really the driving factor is how much we're spending for the work being performed. Depending upon the item that we're purchasing, whether it's just public works supplies or whether it's public works services, we have made an effort over the past 2 years to put a number of those contracts out to bid, and many of them are covered under contracts, but not all of them are, and not all of them are required to be either. It really depends upon the service that's being provided. I think broadly, just going to the presentation from the DPW budget hearing, there were 3 areas we identified that we made changes in contracted services. The first is that we were holding machinery maintenance at level at $66,500 to the FY15 amount. That we took the tree care budget and looked at the average expenditure over the past 3 years and reduced it to $32,000. And we didn't make any change to the stormwater, although we did put that $45,000 in after the budget hearing on April 14th. But I think that that's what we kind of ended up at getting to that $54,900 number, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure, we also adjusted tree care,
Yep.
and streetlights, and cemetery.
Streetlights, that's right.
So,
Cemetery what?
cemetery, parks and grounds, so that was 11,800 that we, adjusted that figure for.
Out of which line was that?
You took that out.
Which line was that?
That was purchase of services, I'd have to go in to see exactly what line, but I believe it was based upon, the previous year's trend.
The trend, yeah.
You took it out, actually, I think.
Right, we
Yes, we took it
reduced it.
out, yes, yep. I'm
We're
just
trying to
see
show you
which-
where the $54,900
Yeah.
came from.
Yes,
That there was a
yeah.
makeup to it.
Right,
But I can provide that information for the next meeting.
yeah.
Again, just in relation to that, again, I apologize I wasn't able to make the April 14th meeting, but in light of the reduction in personnel, I would expect that there may be an increase in purchase services or outside services in order to supplement the needs of the community and what the DPW normally would have done. I know you're in a state of flux right now, but.
The $107,000 doesn't,
No, the 107, that's not, I'm not questioning the 107 at all. The $170,000, I understand exactly what that is. That's, hiring new people is step one as opposed to.
oh, okay.
Right.
No, that, I'm talking about the next line down, and which includes purchase of services, outside services. I would anticipate that until you get to a full complement or determine what the complement needs to be as far as the level of personnel, you may find the need to purchase additional outside services rather than less.
No snow.
No snow.
Yeah.
No snow. I mean, that's the only thing that I would be cautious of. And again, I apologize for not being here at that meeting. I just would think that we would certainly allow ourselves enough latitude to hire outside vendors and services to meet the needs of the community based upon the reduction in current personnel.
Yeah, and my purpose of inquiry seems like there's some pretty broad latitude built into this past couple of fiscal years, and if there's gonna be an attempt at a cultural shift there, that maybe there's more controls that we might wanna consider giving over to.
Yeah, I look at it two different issues, right? It's gonna take a little while to determine how things are gonna work, but in the meantime, there's work that's gonna be done, and we're in the busy season as far as,
Yeah,
this is when the
definitely.
overtime gets in, this is when the extra projects are being done, and we have a reduced number of personnel available, and therefore, the services are still required, the needs still need to be met, and generally, it would be done by outside contractors. And if we're reducing the budget in that particular area, I think we're setting ourselves up to fail. And again,
No,
the
I
next town
wasn't
meeting will be
talking
October.
about that, though.
No, but
I
that's what I'm
was,
talking,
yeah, I think what I understood from the presentation was a bit of a shift over from the personnel line item to salary pool so that,
So you get
additional
backfill.
hires or
Yeah, so you
things like
backfill the
that.
positions, I
Right.
understand all that.
Exactly, and then maybe some sort of shift over of, purchase services for some
I think,
other,
Steve, that from
independent
an
kind
overall
of
budget
review
point
of
view, if
it.
we're gonna
You know what I
trade
mean?
off-
Bob,
Before it gets spent, I guess. Just some more independent controls over it, I guess. But, that's not, I just wanted to see that sort of a breakdown in terms of what we are purchasing for services and what all of that funding is being used for. I could see now with the reduction in workforce, but I'm talking about prior to now and what was reported to us is spending up to December, I think. was what was reported in there.
That's correct.
So-
And again, my concern is that we're talking about a reduction in purchase of outside services when we have a reduction in personnel to do the work. You know, so I would think there may be a need for at least status quo, if not an increase in outside services in order to meet the demands until we find out what that balance is. So
But, Steve, as I was going to say, based on the fact that carrying the salary pool, the contingent of staff, October town meeting comes, we have a new DPW director in place, and he wants to make an adjustment associated with putting more in service and less in personnel. Because I doubt if we will, by the time we get to a new DPW director, that we will have filled every single position.
No, I wouldn't expect that we would, but we're talking about July, August, and September.
Yeah.
3 very busy months with long days of sunshine to work. We do a significant amount of additional
Michael,
work and
want to comment
services.
on that?
Maybe to ease a bit of the concern, the reduction in that line, the $54,900, and Liz, I'm gonna need your help with identifying the numbers, but one portion of it, and I think it was $10,000 or so, was for the streetlights. And that was just basically directly related to the trend, the data that RMLD provided to us, and in turning all of the lights on. I mean, that's basically what we factored. Any light that was off would be converted to LED and would be restored to service.
It
And
would
it would-
result in a savings.
And it would still result in savings, that's right.
Right.
So that's one area, just to alleviate that concern. The second area that I would note is the tree care,
18,000.
which was $18,000. Again, that is contracted services that we've used. We
Haven't
at this-
fully expended over the
Yeah, right, we haven't fully expended the work to that. I mean, that's probably the biggest risk area, given the season. But then again, the majority of the trimming, I think, as most of us probably do at home, is, done at the end of the season when it's a little easier to do. But that's probably the biggest risk area, the tree care, which was, you said, $18,000. The other area that we made the reduction was in the machinery maintenance, if I recall, right?
Yes, it was $8,500.
It was $8,500,
And then this was a cemetery one, which.
was based on the trend.
But that's with what level of personnel?
Yeah, well, I think that's what we probably have to look at, just the trend
So
number.
you get fewer people working in the cemetery, and you're reducing purchase of services. You may need it.
Yeah, but
In
I
the summer
think
months, we have
that's
mostly
about
mower maintenance and upkeep.
No, I mean, that's, again, like the trees, that's one that's that's a potential direct service.
We're not doing it now, though.
So, I mean, we can take the feedback and go through and scrub this number.
No, I
To a little
understand,
more
I understand you
detail.
have to balance the budget,
Yeah.
and this is how you've kind of done it, but I mean, I'm just
Yeah.
a little bit concerned that we're shortchanging ourselves in the busiest months of the year as opposed to, other than plow and snow, which we didn't have to do much, unfortunately. You're cutting yourself short.
What's the
Your
number for
ability to
purchase of services?
meet the needs.
I have,
54,900.
How much?
54,900.
you have
No, no.
collaborated on this approach with our temporary DPW director, right?
We have, yes. I think if we could I think there might be a greater level of comfort if we could give the detailed breakdown on the screen of that number, and the justification for why. So we can come back to the board at the next meeting with that information.
What's the total you have in the budget, though?
For purchase of services?
Yeah, now.
758,589, reduced from 799,489.
Yeah, so
In
it's still
those
over
line
700,000.
Yeah.
I understand, but we're reducing
Plus,
a
we're
number that we're
adding
gonna
back.
have a greater need and demand for.
We're adding back
Plus
65.
we are adding the 45 and the 20.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, the 20
wasn't there.
wasn't there originally
That's
for the study.
That's for the study.
So, I mean, we'll come back with a detailed breakdown of that $54,900 for further discussion and evaluation, and some alternatives if there's a level of comfort or discomfort with regard to that number.
Maybe it's only me, that's all.
I mean, and the other thing is that there's only a $10,000 reduction in your 54,000 series line item, so,
Which division?
supplies. So it's not much of a
That's machinery
reduction, and I know what you're saying, but, I
see
mean,
it as
I'm
probably
just
the
trying to
largest
get at
area,
what,
Probably the most significant needs that need to go, in order to meet the needs, it's probably gonna be, what needs to be utilized is outside services, and we're reducing that portion of the budget. I don't know. But anyway,
So we'll
research is great,
We'll come back,
Yeah,
we'll come back with a.
let's see let's see.
Description of
Let's
that.
see.
but I mean, I don't wanna do it at the time of year when we have the most demand. And I'm not just talking about snow.
And unfortunately, it coincides with our budget review and determination, so it's probably a good time to take a look at it.
But we can make if we can realize savings, do it in October, reduce the budget then, not now, when we need the money. That's all.
One thing that I'll note that doesn't show up here, but showed up in the presentation was, again, that transfer for the 3 positions to be carried in the salary pool of $121,877. But again, you know, that's being held aside in the salary pool. I'm just noting it because it doesn't show up here. And then separately, we did the same for the water enterprise salary contingency.
Yeah, I think Michael Steve's point is that if you needed more outside services to cover the summer months,
Yeah, oh yeah.
even
no,
though we're carrying maybe the right amount in the budget, they're in the wrong places and we can't spend that money.
Mhm.
We have to wait until October.
No, I didn't mean to say that to address the concern. I'm just noting that
No,
it doesn't show up here.
I'm aware of it. I mean,
Yeah.
we talked about
Yeah.
transferring the money into the salary pool, and
Right.
that's great. Yep.
Okay, next.
So those total out at net adjustments of $100,837
Reduction.
in reduction. Thank you. And I'm just, noting here that reflects the difference between the preliminary budget submission and revised on April 14th, getting us to a budget gap. If all of those changes were to be approved at $0, we would be in balance.
Yes, Michael.
Back to the previous slide.
Mm-hmm.
Just 2 quick things. We had talked about this during the budget hearings in regards to the 4th of July. Did the board, or at least I get the sense that the board was in favor of adding some money?
Yes.
Or supporting the 4th of July in some way?
Yes, that's correct. There was a instruction provided at the budget, prior to the budget being submitted to the board to identify funding, which the finance director has done from unexpended funds under the authority of the town administrator that would address that need. And I believe it was $5,000, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That would augment that. It's not in the budget here because we have an unexpended appropriation.
In this current fiscal year,
That
it'll
we
be
could-
appropriate. It'll be available to them?
It's available to them, yeah. It's available to them
Okay.
now.
Okay. And then, getting back to the education incentive,
Mhm.
would it be more logical to take all the education incentive on the general government side and transfer it into an HR budget? And then until the policy's written and approved, it will stay in the HR and then be filtered out through HR through the policy? Or do you want to keep it in the individual
I would say,
departments?
I think that from a standpoint of putting control on it, and from a standpoint of identifying where we're likely to end up in the long term with that it would achieve that by doing that. Similar again to the program that I think the school department operates.
Yeah.
It's a single fund. There are larger departmental requests that are out there
Right.
that it's going to be a little harder to manage, but we can deal with those in the fiscal year 2018 project. I'm speaking to the public safety departments because they're a bit larger. But we could either address that in the October town meeting or address that in fiscal year 18.
There may be some contractual negotiations that need to take place in order to facilitate that. In the meantime.
Certainly to change it.
To change it. In the meantime, for non-union personnel.
Right, that's what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I think we could look to do that and establish a line under the town
And,
administrator.
right, and it's if you decide to go with a specific policy that even has just a specific number,
Mhm.
to get a flat number, then you don't want to have one town budget or one department budget having more than everyone else gonna
Yeah.
get.
But I think it will limit the exposure, so to speak, of doing that,
Thank
or
you.
by doing that.
Well, I mean, Kate brought it up, and I think that's where you were kind of going.
I would say that my thought would be we wouldn't approve that unless, I understand the premise of if you don't, it's lost, but why would we approve that if we didn't have the policy in place? And what are we agreeing to do, 100% reimbursement? What if
Right.
someone goes to a $100,000, just, filling it out, $100,000 versus the $6,000 reimbursement versus the $14,000? How is there, it has to be equitable. If we're gonna do it across the board, I think there has to be some sort of, is it 30% of reimbursement, is it 50%, is it 100%? What do we have in place, what do they have in place as the policy that they utilize to determine who gets reimbursement on the CVAs? And let's make it, at least for the ones that we can make a policy apply, make that in place before we just say, we're acquiescing to it in the budget. Do you know what I mean? I know we've talked about having a policy, and that really doesn't seem like it would be a lot to put something together. And it's a great idea if we have the funds to be able to get the workforce some education, but what's the criteria?
Right now, there's none.
Yeah, we should
candidly.
have that beforehand. I don't know if, can we do that, take it out and put it into HR as a,
I think ultimately the
Fund
discretion
or-
is the board to make a recommendation to the, to town meeting, and I'm not uncomfortable with making that recommendation to the board. I think that there's an assurance there that we're committed to an education program. It might be that it's not at that level, at the level that was requested, but that it's at some other level. I don't know where it all shakes out, but I think the most important thing is we are committed to do something, but we want to establish the parameters before we do it.
yeah.
And in this specific instance, we embrace the idea of this particular department head being able to participate in it. So-
With parameters in place, though. Definitely.
Jeff?
Yes. So currently, we cannot say no to somebody under these circumstances because we already have a precedent of giving somebody 100%.
Well, to speak candidly, we have said no, or I have said no, and it just has not been forwarded to the board for consideration. This particular request, the one that's gotten the most attention, this was the second year that it was requested of me. Last year, in the process of recommending a balanced budget to the board, I was required to eliminate it. This year, the process was a bit different. There was a desire to have all of the requests forwarded to the board prior to this exercise of reconciling the budget, and it was kept in. And it does appear that we may be able to fund some or all of it, depending upon where this all falls out.
Does it fall under available funds? I mean, do we have if we have the available funds, we can offer it, or?
So to answer that question, if we were to do everything that's identified here, the answer is yes, it's available funds and would be requested at town meeting.
No, I'm sorry. I meant as far as the educational aspect that you were talking about, that if someone, if the cost was $6,000, I think we had an example of $6,000, correct? Okay. And they get 100% of that. And somebody else comes in, there's another program that's $8,000. If we have funds available for that, is what I meant to say, all right, what is the criteria for determining what percentage they get, if not 100%?
Are you asking me what the criteria is right now?
Right. Right now, there's none.
There's none.
So we almost can't say no, unless we don't have the money.
Well, I mean, it all comes down to dollars. I mean, and what we're willing to appropriate into a budget,
Right.
right? So that's a piece of it. If there's no money in the budget, then there's no distribution. But getting back to the issue of trying to construct a policy
Right.
that treats employees on some kind of an equal basis, and it's not equal across the board, right? Whether it's a key employee program or or whatever, I think that has to be worked out. So
Yeah,
there's two
I
key
agree with that, yeah.
employees that have made a request at this point. Michael has put it in the budget, fully knowing that he has a problem associated with going forward. And,
But there's a
Michael.
second piece to that too, and that's protecting the town's investment.
Right.
We don't make this investment and then have them walk out the door,
That's
6
right.
months
that's
later.
that's more of the
So we need to
policy
capture
part
that,
of it,
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a big dilemma. If everybody signed up and
Yeah,
said, I
that's
want to go to school.
exactly where I was
and,
going with this.
You know, we can't afford
Yeah,
it.
But you would put that in your policy, that it would obviously be subject to the available appropriation on a case-by-case,
I think
reserve in his discretion to say no for any reason.
Everything is subject to
Appropriation.
available funds. I mean, that's what town meeting's ultimate control is,
Yeah, yeah,
is what they approve.
right. There have to be parameters around it.
Well, it's getting very
There.
late and.
So anyway, we're in
I-
balance as of right now with these proposals. How's the school department, where are they at?
They're
The meeting
at,
Wednesday morning.
Depending on how you look at it, they're at about 400K. Now, they've proposed,
Under?
a method of balancing the budget while adding things that they need and feel very strong about adding. And we're gonna be working on that again on Wednesday. But, they've come up with a proposal to balance the budget. But it's gonna create,
Is it gonna
my
impact,
guess, it's gonna create a problem.
is it gonna impact the formula we're using right now as far as what we have balanced it?
No, our budget, the numbers that Michael's working to is what the town allocation is.
Okay.
There's some additional funds that came out of the House budget, which amounts to 85K in Chapter 70 roughly, maybe around 35K and additional sped money that's riskier. And what was the other item, Liz? Oh,
The regional school assessment. Did you mention that?
The regional, yeah, the enrollment
the enrollment.
is expected to be down, but we haven't got a definitive.
This is enrollment in the
Yeah, the-
Vocational
voc
school.
I
school,
think there was
vocational
9 or
school.
10
Yeah.
applied, and we haven't heard on the acceptance number yet, but it sounds like it's gonna be less than what
Could be a
we
decrease.
budgeted.
So
But they haven't,
that's gonna, potentially, it could get up to $200,000 off of their 400,000. And I don't remember whether did it go above 400,000 when they decided not to implement parking fees?
I thought it
have
went
to
to
go back
three-
and look at the number.
I thought it went to 392.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I remember. It was
Yeah.
350, and I think it went to 392.
yeah, it went 350 to 390.
395.
All right,
That's
so,
where
so,
they
so
are.
the additional allocation from the state allows them some more flexibility
The
within their
additional
budget.
allocation for the state, we've agreed.
Frees up some other money.
We've agreed to put it directly into the school. Because normally all of that goes into the split. In other words, we take the total amount of available funds, including Chapter 70 and everything else, and we take out our, what we call fixed cost, which is our debt service. The two big numbers are the debt service and the employee benefits. And the employee benefits, the health insurance is the biggest piece of that, and that covers school and town. What's left is split 66-34. School gets 66%, and as we get usually very close to the end, and if they get some additional
67.
Chapter 70 money, it's basically, even though we don't change the split, it's added to the available amount of money they have.
Okay.
And that's where we are right now. Yes, Jeff?
Okay, so these new funds, you're not dividing 66-34. You're
Not
giving
the
it
Chapter
all-
70, right.
All to the
Right.
school.
And the sped, by the way, we have no
Well-
control over anyway.
Well, I know,
comes
that
in
I understand,
separately.
that I understand.
That goes directly to the
I
school.
don't, I mean, is that fair?
Well, we're trying to help them balance their
We're
budget.
trying to
Well, I
help
under-
them
I- well,
balance the budget.
I don't know, I don't have 100, I don't know if, I'm not 100% sure why their budget has to be so high unless these are all mandates that they have from the state.
Well, I mean,
Okay.
they did make the case that there's a lot of mandates, right? They make the case that three direct employees that they're adding are aimed at saving money by preventing some outplacements of some additional special ed. Special ed's killing them.
I understand
That's one
that.
big
I
factor.
understand.
And then they have three positions that relate to high school programs, although one of them is related also to special ed in some form or another, which I don't fully understand, but.
Right, I don't either. And then that's what they did. They elected to add 6 new positions,
And
but they're gonna cut 3 to have the 6, so that was sort of an approach.
actually, it's more than that.
Is it more than that?
Yeah.
I don't know, I
Which
just-
impacts, you know, I mean, I prefer to wait until they settle it out and come up public with what they're gonna do, because it'll only be a speculation at this point. But they're working on, you know, closing their gap like we've done the same thing.
But, I mean,
Could they use more money? Yeah, sure, they could use more money.
Well,
The problem is
But so can the
that-
town. The town could
No,
use more money
The
too.
real problem is that for the first time, we've created a 3-year revenue plan, and we've applied 3-year pro forma budgets to the revenue plan. And the pro forma budget we're working with for the school is what they provide. And the issue is, you know, next year there's a gap, the following year there's a gap, and the gap keeps growing, as, you know, we've seen. And the concern is that you apply additional money to the school budget out of one-time funds, it creates a bigger gap the following year.
Yeah.
And that's the struggle, and I mean, I'm a pro-school supporter, and I've advocated for additional money, but, you know, after you start looking at the numbers that I created, the monster, right, Michael, with the 3-year plan.
it worked though. It was
It-
smart. It
You
helped
know,
us
it makes you,
organize
it
it.
makes you take a serious look at the whole thing. And the school population hasn't grown. Remember, if we go back into the 2000s, we were faced with, you know, that growth going
Yeah.
back from the 1,800 kids in the late
Mhm.
80s to the 90s of the town growth and approaching 28 and went a little over 2,800 kids. It's dropped off a little bit. The problem is that there's still a bubble. First, it was in the middle school a few years ago when Kathy was the superintendent, and then it's now at the high school. And, you know, so they're struggling dealing with, you know, how to provide the kinds of programs people are looking for at the high school, which isn't on a, you know, I suppose if you took all the teachers in the high school and you divided by the teacher population, you find out that the class sizes are probably down at 10 or 11 or 12 or something, you know. I don't know, because I haven't run the exact number, but it's because they offer these various programs, and they want to offer programs, they feel they need them, and then tie that in with the special ed. And they're adding personnel when the school population is level or going down a little bit. But then you got people, the new Vogue school opened up, they ended up with more kids there, and there's a cost for that. That's coming off of, where is that now? That's coming off of the,
It's in the regional school assessment.
Yeah.
Combined.
And it's significant, because then you gotta add the transportation in on top of it.
Mhm.
It's well into the 20,000 range.
Mhm.
so we've had financial planning
Per
meetings
student.
almost every 2 weeks. And we're getting close, but.
But if you have a strong objection to it, then, you know, I'd like to hear it, and if other members feel the same way. You know,
It's not a question of objecting to it. We know that the schools have needs. But, you know, we work on a basis of 66 to 34, and now we have X amount of dollars coming in, and it's going 100% in one direction. That changes that equation, and that equation could be 70-30, could be 75-25. So, you know, the town has to manage itself. It has its issues, and the school has its issues. And we all have to live within our budgets. and manage ourselves accordingly. And, it does become a matter of fairness when, I mean, I guess it's a small number when you think about it at the moment, but it's a one-time.
No, it's not a one-time. If you look
Once
at it
it's
from,
in.
Yeah.
if you look at it from the point of view of each year.
Right, but as you said, it
Creates a
expands,
base.
the number gets bigger
Creates
and
a new
bigger.
base, and the following
You know.
year, they've got, if you look at
This is a
their,
recurring problem, it's a recurring issue.
Well,
every
let
year.
me share, I got a bunch of phone calls with regard to the.
Michael, are you done with this?
Am I?
Yeah,
Say yes.
yeah.
Yes, I am.
My face is on fire.
He's getting a tan on one side. No,
It's a furnace.
I got a bunch of phone calls with regard to the parking situation at the schools.
Mm.
All right, and people were upset that you have a new school, you have new parking area, and the expenses are getting much higher. And so the question is, why can't, people pay for busing to go to school, so why can't students pay for parking at the school? Now, I'm not necessarily an advocate for that. All I know is I get the call, and there are people out there who have that concern. Personally, I think busing and parking should be included in the budget, but we can't do that, unfortunately. But still, they wonder, because they're seeing the taxes go up and up and up, and they're finding out that on a small contribution such as parking, parents don't want to do that. So that whole issue of fairness, there's a way to cover costs, and the school made a suggestion, and it didn't hold. I understand that, okay? But there was the other option, the other alternative of, and I've seen it in other places now, it's starting to become a bit of a popular thing, of creating, using, and somebody presented it to the school, I believe, as well, but putting solar panels in there to help cover costs, all right, in the parking lot, and so you can drive in underneath the solar panels and park your car, and you get revenue from the solar panels. So there are out-of-the-box things, I believe, that have to be thought about, have to be considered going forward. Otherwise, every year we take, when there's newfound money, it all goes in one direction, but it never goes to town hall or to the employees at town hall. Okay, so it becomes a matter of fairness at that point, and I think that's that's the input that I'm getting, and it's a question of everybody covering their fair share.
Yes, hopefully they schedule their budget hearing on a night that we're not meeting, and we can all go to the meeting. No, it's a systemic problem, right? There's, if you take the school budget without any increases in terms of personnel, just say it's going to be identical to next year. You take the step increases, which represent maybe 45% of the teaching staff based on where it is now, and you talk about a cost of living of a couple of percent. I don't remember what it is this year. It's in there 1.5, or is it 2? It's 2.
Is it 2 or 3?
I
It's
think
either 2 or 3.
The schools?
Yeah, and their
It's not
contract,
three
the
this year.
teacher's contract, I think
This
was
year.
2 this year, 3 next year.
Next year is 3.
Okay, thank you.
following years. Yeah. So you take that, and they're up, at least the teacher labor force, which is the bigger labor force, they're at 4.5% increase, and we're offering them something less than that based on health insurance costs. 7% is $350,000, roughly. Is that the increase?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that range?
It's a
Right.
little more than 7%. That.
Yeah,
Seven-
okay,
seven
well,
and a half.
I'm just ballpark numbers,
Yeah.
so that's $350,000 that if we didn't have that increase, and you divided it like we've been dividing it, that would have given them over $200,000 of additional money. If we didn't take $150,000 more, right? Remember last year we took 125, and this year we added the 125, which made it 250, right? That we took off the top for our OPEB. You heard Dawn on the capital plan, and we're taking money off the top, cash off the top from the operating, what would normally be the tax and the total tax revenue, and we're applying it now to capital. So what we're doing is we are taking money that we haven't been doing a good job of these kinds of things in the past, and now we're applying that money, which means there's less money for town budget and for school budget. We're struggling. It's not enough money to go around. I'm not advocating that we go out and say, we're gonna go raise the taxes with an override or something. But the point is that there are some reasons that they're in the position that they're in. You know? And they've got some initiatives and plans that they've been executing over the past few years. It started with Kathleen Willis, although I think she did, whatever she added, she found ways of, you know, balancing. And right now, they're implementing these programs, and they come to the realization they gotta take something out. And we'll see what happens. Just like we're doing. Only we have a smaller problem.
So the
But
next
in
item on
years
the,
past, we've been able to balance the budget, and they still had a deficit. So, I mean, we entered without a lot of sweat with a balanced budget based on the split that we've been using.
so the
When
next
I
item,
started on the board, the split was 60-40.
That
Right,
seems
Steve?
better.
But there was a reason for it to grow, and that was the school population getting larger and larger. But it's leveled up. Will it come down? Well, it did once before.
They did.
When I was on the school committee, it had gotten down to 1,800. We're at 28. And we closed, when I was on the committee, we closed this school and we closed the little school.
next item on the agenda, Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Motion to adjourn?
Is that what it is? Okay.
Town administrator's report, are we gonna,
You
I
gonna
just-
talk tax collector?
nothing?
I don't think there's anything we need to discuss
Nope.
with regard to that.
Okay. Anybody?
No, I'm sorry, I was answering the selectman's question. Just a brief note, I just asked the public to keep an eye on the town website for additional information relative to street sweeping. And I'll waive the reading of anything further on my report for tonight.
Okay, and I just had one question. I know you responded to me regarding someone that was saying there was some big potholes. I don't know what that actually means because I didn't go out and look.
Yeah, it was an area that.
I was just more interested in, and I explained to the gentleman that, you know, as long as it's on the list, it'll get done. And I just wanted to make sure it was on the list.
Yeah, so this is an area that, it's a road grading. It's a road that's in need of some attention. I've spoken with the acting DPW director, and we had an issue that was out of our control where we had a contract let out for contracted grading services. That contractor backed out and wasn't able to provide the service, so we had to go and identify a secondary contractor that we had that had bid on the project, and we signed a contract with that contractor last week. And now, from a work plan standpoint, I know the acting director will be bringing it up with his staff tomorrow's department meeting.
You know what I noted last year on Lindor Road, which I travel on a regular basis, it was coming apart in a few places, really bad. And the past couple of years, they've done some area patching of a road. You know, they had cut, even on 62, there's
Right.
a few places where they cut out a big
Mhm.
square.
Mm-hmm.
And they did that, and it's held up pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, and that was done with a contractor, I'm sure.
Yes.
Bob,
Alright.
Bob, if I may.
Anybody else got anything?
Yeah, if, with that road, are you talking about Gordon Road, or are you talking, that is a different issue?
I believe it's the same email, MacArthur Road, or the resident
It's
manager
down-
of
Yes,
MacArthur.
It's down in your area.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that, okay.
It's the same area,
It's
yeah.
same, okay, great.
Bob apparently got the same email.
I would just like to mention the passing of Bob Edkins, who was a former Finance Committee member, and other various boards and committees in the community. Great public servant, lived in town for, 40, 50 years. Passed away this past week, and just again, like to acknowledge his services and send our condolences to his family.
And anyone else?
Yeah, well, we have an election coming up
Yeah,
next week,
sorry I
right?
was gonna mention, but thank you, Jim.
Yeah. And it's exciting. We have 4 people running for 2 seats, and we have
A contest on the
3
school
people
side, yeah.
running for 2 seats on the school side. And, I hope everybody does well. And, Bob, as far as I'm concerned, the primo person on this board, in my
Michael or I
estimation.
don't do
Yeah.
good. There'll be a couple of,
so-
a member or 2 sitting
I
at
just-
this table.
I hope the community
Come,
makes the best decision possible.
Come late next week.
So that's all.
Michael,
I just want to congratulate all the North Reading folks that ran in the Boston Marathon. We always seem to have a large contingent, and I just want to congratulate them. A lot of effort they put into that. They should be recognized, representing North Reading, so I appreciate that they do it. That's all I have.
Good. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
In a second?
Sure. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So
Sorry, Bob.
when do I get to
Getting so late.
propose it?